To order.
Write that down. I'm going to write that down.
I would love to invite our selectmen to come and sit. And our finance committee. If I could have,
you have the finance committee?
Detective Cheever, if I could have you and the chief come sit up front.
This table right here? It's like no one likes me. Just like
Finance committee, can I have you come
So I
and
can
sit
go
in the
down
front row?
fastest?
Because this is,
So I
we
can
need
kick
to,
Sean.
conversation.
Where is,
nice
where
try.
is Sean?
Do we,
Hi. How are you?
do you know the status of any other members of the finance committee?
It's kind of offensive. You have the very important one here. Do you need
We're
more?
also, I'm the representative. No, 7:25. We were told to.
7:25, okay, good. Okay, when they start to, okay.
That's the email.
Okay, so we're going to start with the
Super Bowl
Pledge of
start time.
Allegiance.
Right. Oh wait, I'm sorry.
No, he's not here. Don't worry about it.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I feel like a broken record. This is our third week in a row that I'm introducing this as a meeting that is unlike our previous meeting. This, I think, is unprecedented because I'm not sure we've ever had all of the selectmen, or most of the selectmen, 4 out of the 5, soon to be our finance committee, as well as our school committee. And I really appreciate having you, Chief Madigan and Detective Cheever, coming to join us tonight. As obviously safety is on everybody's mind. Importantly, this is a meeting of the 3 bodies. We have a lot to discuss tonight as it relates to the town budget, the new school. So as soon as the rest of the finance committee is here, I'm going to need, if you can help kind of shepherd them to the front so that it really is the conversation that we are hoping it to be. And I think, I was going to say I want to be mindful of time, which is a good lead-in to our first guests that are here tonight. Mr. Franklin, if you could come down and talk to us. We have a program called For the Love of Learning that we have not done for the school committee in quite a while, but I know that it's something that not only the school committee gets a lot of information from, but I know we've heard good feedback from our viewers at home. So,
Can I talk a little bit about why we did
yes,
it?
please introduce.
So we brought For the Love of Learning to a portion of the school committee meetings because it's important to realize, for the committee to be reminded about why we do what we do. It's important to talk about what's going on in the classrooms. And so the way that we did this when we started this program was to bring teachers and students into the school committee meetings to talk about the things that were happening in the classrooms. And so tonight, we have one of my dear colleagues, Mr. Peter Franklin, and his students here tonight to talk about the mindfulness programs that are happening at the high school and within Mr. Franklin's classes. So I turn it over to you.
Thank you. If you would all indulge me for just a moment, and please put everything down. I'll patiently wait until you do so. And we're going to do a brief little exercise, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we just did. So if you will just kind of sit for a moment. Find yourself a nice, comfortable position, whatever that is. And if it's comfortable for you, just softly close your eyes. And allow yourself to be still for just a moment. And perhaps beginning with just noticing what you're thinking right now, where your thoughts are. And just kind of paying attention to the traffic that's going on inside your mind. Not trying to do anything in particular, just allowing your thoughts to be however they want to be. And now gently guide your focus to your breath. And be aware of your in-breath for its full duration. And the out-breath for its full duration. So that was a very brief example of how my classes start each day. And the reason we do that, especially at the high school, is that there are 4 minutes between classes. And even on a good day, it's very difficult to get from point A to point B in 4 minutes, let alone dealing with other people in the hallway, people you see, people you don't see, going to your locker, if you even remember where your locker is, getting into class, and just as you pour into class, as the bell rings, the teacher's ready to go. And you're still carrying all this baggage. So we use this as a way just to disengage and to let go for just a moment. It generally takes about 1 minute, just as we did. There's a chance just to stop for a second. Just as you did. Some of you immediately relaxed and let go. Some of you seem to have a little more difficult time. And that's normal, because we get so caught up in doing all that we're doing, we forget to just pause for a moment. So, I am Peter Franklin. I am an English teacher at the high school. I dabble in English, I say, and I teach a lot of mindfulness. And my students in all of my classes, even though they didn't sign up for mindfulness, do take mindfulness, because I think it's a very important skill. Learning how to be present, learning how to relax, learning how not to be as uptight and stressed out. I am fortunate, I'm very grateful to be able to teach a mindfulness class that we are offering this year once a quarter. So I'm in my 3rd class now, and I will say it is the most difficult class I've ever taught, because I have them for an hour. And while there's so much that I would like to do, I have 2 certifications in teaching mindfulness, but if I give them too much, they get stressed out, and that kind of defeats the purpose of the class. So I've kind of learned to kind of ratchet back a little bit and give them a lot of space, and it turns out to be an oasis for them. We do exercises, we do work, and one I'll talk briefly about, and then I have 2 students who would like to talk to you as well. So if you think about for a second where your thoughts were, there are 3 places your thoughts can be, period. In the present, right now. And how difficult is that? Because while you've been in this room, everybody has left this room at least a half dozen times. First circle, and I have extra copies, but I have a little model that you might be able to see. First circle is the past. Things that have already happened, didn't happen, should have happened, shouldn't have happened, things you said, things you should have said, things you wish you wouldn't have said. But we know intellectually it's over, it's gone, it's done. And it's good to learn from the past, but when it keeps coming back to us over and over and over again, we start getting obsessed with, oh, and now I'm really uptight because I don't want to do that again. And where we are really good is 3rd circle, which is the future. What's next? What if? Where are we going? And if you are, for an example, and one of my favorite examples is at the beginning of the year in September with seniors. Major 3rd circle. What if I don't do well on my SATs? What if I don't get my application done? What if I don't get everything in on time? What if I don't get accepted in any schools? What if I don't go anywhere? What if I'm homeless? What if my parents hate me? What if I lose all my friends? What if I'm a dismal failure? And all of those things go on, and they all know they're not true, but we get stuck there. So part of mindfulness is actually, for me, is split into 2 pieces. The first is the formal practice, and you just did that, sitting quietly and breathing. Scientifically, it stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system and legitimately causes you to relax. The other side is the practical piece of being aware of making choices. And it's okay to choose to be in 1st circle if you want to be there. And it's okay to choose to be in 3rd circle if you want to be there, but it's a choice, not an autopilot, not something that happens unconsciously for you. So it's about making choices. Mindfulness, of course, as we know, is about being present in this moment with your thoughts non-judgmentally. But you can be angry and be mindful. You can be upset and be mindful. You can be disappointed and be mindful. You can be happy and be mindful by choice. So with the model of the circles of attention, you can note where your mind is going. And if you choose to go there, go and have a great time. But if you choose, just come on back again. And like anything we practice, it happens over and over. And if you're an athlete or a dancer or a musician, you know you practice and practice and practice. So I'm going to stop. I have two students with me, Lexi Howard and Matt Mitlin. Both Lexi and Matt are in my current speech and debate class. Lexi took mindfulness last term as well, so she had a double dose of me, and they will kind of give you an idea of what goes on.
I'm Max Midland. I'm a 12th grader, and I'm in a speech and debate class.
Oh, I'm Lexi. I'm also in 12th grade, and I was in speech and debate and mindfulness.
Well, for me personally, I've played 3 sports my entire life. I've been in chorus. I've done numerous activities. I've always found out that I have so much stress and so much anxiety deep inside me, and I've always wanted to try to find a way just to release all that stress and calm down and feel like myself again. And once I started doing mindfulness with Mr. Franklin every single day before speech and debate, it helped me. It helped me relax, helped me calm down, relieve anger, stress, whatever I had on my mind. And I have chorus almost every day, and I'm always stressed to hit that right note and it infuriates me when I can't get a note correctly. And I have that class 2 periods later, and it just makes me happy and free. And especially before the speeches, I'm always so stressed, worried how it's gonna go. And after some simple breathing for maybe 4 or 5 minutes, it completely relaxes my mind, and I have a great speech. So. That's great.
So my overall experience with mindfulness itself was life-changing because I honestly never really like believed in mindfulness. I always thought kind of like hippies did it, or like spiritual people did it. But I kind of started enjoying it more and more because in speech and debate, like he said, when we do our speeches, it's kind of stressful because like I failed my first speech, but after that I did good. So like breathing before it kind of just helps everyone relax and like just take a deep breath, and like when you go up there, you're just kind of chilled and like relax. But I also, a few like things that I love to do, like even in softball, I learned like, cause I don't know, like softball, I've always loved it, and like this year it's starting to get more stressful than last year. So like a technique that Mr. Franklin taught us was finger breathing, and you just like go like this and like you breathe, so no one can really ever see it. So I don't know, that's like my favorite thing to do. Yeah, mindfulness is just very, very helpful in my life now.
Can you demonstrate that on
so
finger breathing?
you breathe in, so like you go like this, and you breathe in when you go up, and then out when you go down. So like you just go like this, and then once you're at like the end of your hand, you go back. Then you kind of
So you can do it by your side and nobody really knows what you're
that's
doing.
what I do.
Yeah.
Like in my speeches, like I'll just like stand here and just like go like this under the desk, and like it works
So
very
you're
well.
practicing mindfulness before you got up here, like in front
Yeah,
of...
no, that's
So-
what I asked Mr. Franklin.
It's pretty awesome, because like
Yeah.
you're rocking this.
Yeah, because that's the first thing I asked him if we were gonna breathe before I did it, because I just get really stressful, and then I start talking fast, and then, as Mr. Franklin says, it goes downhill like that. So
Right.
So you said it does help you with your speeches, but do you feel like it helps you when you perform too? Like doing that, does it actually help you have a better performance, or do better on a test or something like that?
Yeah.
Definitely, because it's just when your body's relaxed, your mind's also relaxed. So it's so much easier to perform on a quiz, a test, a speech, anything. It just relaxes everything from head to toe. That's
it also helps me talk slower, because I'm someone that talks really fast, and like once I'm like debriefed, like I can talk slower.
Do you wish you learned this before senior year?
Yes.
Like, do you think, I mean, honestly, like, should this be something that's required of
I
middle school
personally
students, high school students?
I
Could
mean,
you have done this in middle school, or were you not mature enough?
I honestly would have done it in middle school. One thing that's really helped me from this whole entire year, the biggest thing it's helped me for is the college process, because as all you may know, it's the most stressful time of year for seniors, and it just made me relax and think of my options really. But if I had it in middle school, it would relieve all stress of going up to high school and like the big high school. It's just, yeah.
I have a question and a comment. So is Mr. Franklin's class the only class that you go into and there's mindfulness at the beginning of the class? Because I know there were pockets of it happening in the high school and other classes. Do either of you have another class that begins with mindfulness?
I teach health this year and I'm also teaching it again later on in the year. And we would maybe once a week we would do a body scan, but it really wasn't the same as Mr. Franklin doing it. 'Cause,
It wasn't the same as an
Yeah,
intensive
yeah.
class.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced in health, we do once in a while, we don't do it every single day like we do Mr. Franklin's class. I also do this group therapy session in Miss Kelly's room every Thursday, and we do it before every Thursday session. And it's just relax everyone, everyone's usually talking before, and then we're all just calm and ready to focus.
So my comment for the school committee and the other committees is that this is happening in a concentrated class in Mr. Franklin's classroom in the high school, but there are also pockets of it happening at the elementary level, happening at the middle school. In fact, there was a boys' mindfulness group going on at the middle school and a girls' mindfulness group going on that incorporates yoga.
And it has,
So-
didn't I hear, Mr. Franklin, didn't you do a professional development for staff too? Did you?
We've done a couple.
Right.
2 years ago, Craig Harris and I did
Oh,
a
yeah.
3-day session for faculty. We had
Right.
8 people across the district. We'd like to do more. I would love to do more. It's become an obsession. In a good way, in
Is
a
that the
mindful
third,
way.
is that the third circle?
And I will say that Mr. Franklin has communicated his desires to expand this program frequently, and so we need to find time. But the teachers that took his class have incorporated it into their classrooms, whether it's just at the beginning of the class, whether it's at the end before they transition. But I just want to thank you both for coming and doing your mindfulness prior to getting up here and speaking in front of the
I
class.
have a quick question. Before you go, I have a quick question for you. For the both of you, I have a question. Did you choose to take your mindfulness class, or did it come to you?
So I started in speech and debate because speech and debate is a full year, and it started getting incorporated that way. And then once I started to actually like it, I chose to take the mindfulness class.
Do you think that had you not had Mr. Franklin, who introduced you to that sort of organically, that you would have opted into something like that? Truth.
Honestly, not really.
Okay.
Because as I said, I kind of thought it was for hippies and spiritual people. But then once I started getting used to it, I liked it.
So, well, for me, throughout junior year, I became friends with Mr. Franklin. He took my hat off my head a few times in the hallway. We kind of bonded. I honestly, I've always wanted to take one of his classes, and I've usually had a strong stutter when I'm doing public speaking, but after his class, I just feel more relaxed and calm and ready to take out any speech, and I've always wanted to improve my public speaking. So I joined the class, and it improves way beyond my expectations.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, no worries.
Green and red, lots of green and red, so you know good and bad.
So, before we start in with the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, I think that the school committee is keenly aware of what,
There's one more item under.
I apologize, I am sorry.
It's okay. I have the privilege tonight of recognizing a student who has just been awarded a gold key from the Scholastic Writing Awards in the category of personal essay memoir for her piece Pancakes, Shame, and Death Caps. We take time at our school committee meetings to recognize our students who have received awards through various organizations, and on behalf of the school committee, I present them with a certificate as well. So I would like to congratulate and present a certificate to Miss Olivia Barton. Come on up. This certificate is presented on behalf of the school committee And Olivia will now go on to compete at the national level this spring. Her work will be on exhibit with other regional winners at Breed Hall at Tufts University on March 17th through March 25th. Congratulations, we're very, very proud of you.
Is there a place we can, read your essay? Like, I mean,
Yeah, it'll be on display at Tufts, but I don't know if they publish it on the website unless it's international.
that's awesome. The same essay goes to the national level or directly?
It goes all the way to national.
That's awesome.
Thank
The
you.
best part of our meetings. Congratulations, we're very proud of you, Olivia. I know. We can find
We'll
one.
find out.
We'll link it, right?
So, the school committee is keenly aware of the fears throughout our district. At Stanley, I want to make note particularly there, but after Parkland, school security, safety, emergency response is obviously on everybody's mind. And we felt like it was very important to have the man who's in charge of our town and our security, Chief Madigan, as well as our school resource officer, Detective Cheever, come and talk to us broadly about not only the approach to safety in our district, but to talk about some specifics and some upcoming dates to be aware of. Is that accurate? And
It is, and I haven't had a chance to speak with Detective Cheever or Chief today, but could I do a little introduction about what we've done in the past? I don't even know your talking points, but I think it's important to go over.
you have an idea with it.
So I think what Detective Cheever is going to speak to tonight is the fact that we are an Alice district in terms of what we do, and I want to explain a little bit about what that means. To go back even further with that, as a district, we have a district crisis team. Each of the buildings have building crisis teams, and as a result of these building crisis teams, there are crisis response manuals at every school. The crisis response manuals are typically given out to the district crisis team, which would include our SRO, it would include our DPW director, Gino Cresta, Chief Breen. So they go to the fire, police, DPW director, and all of these crisis response plans are updated annually. In addition to the crisis response plans, as part of those, we have medical plans that are also implemented in the schools. Out of the district crisis team and working with Detective Cheever since I was assistant superintendent, we were talking about having flip charts in each classroom with crises that would occur. And last year, we were able to find some funds to create, I don't know if everybody has seen these flip charts that are mounted in every classroom in plastic bags throughout the district. And in these plastic bags, there are emergency procedures for news media protocols, evacuations, lockdowns, shelters in place, power outages and utility failure, medical emergency, hazardous material spill, suspicious packages, bomb threats, missing person, abductions and kidnapping, weapon assault and intruder, fire and explosions and severe weather. These are best practice, and these other districts around the Commonwealth have these in each classroom as well. We did our research before we had these developed, and with the help of Detective Cheever and high school principal Bob Murphy, they were able to get these done. All of these were reviewed at staff meetings at the beginning of the school year. It was this school year, actually, that we put them in. They came in last year. So these are in every classroom. These are at the entrance and exits of the classroom with class rosters. So the event of emergency, they'd have a class roster, and they'd have the emergency flip charts. One of the things that I wanted to speak to in terms of Alice, and Detective Cheever will talk a little bit about that, is we have been an Alice district since 2015. If you go back to the calendar in 2015, we had 2 professional development days before our school year began. On August 23rd, 2015, we trained our entire district staff on this ALICE protocol because Detective Cheever is an ALICE trainer, Principal Jen Hunt is, as well as Bob Murphy. And so we did a full day of professional development with all of the teachers, the ESPs, everybody, along with the principals. The police department was invaluable that day as they helped us roll it out here at the high school. The following year, we did a modified professional development day, a half-day training, and it was done with the staff in each of their individual buildings. And so their environment was what they owned, rather than having it done here at the high school. In addition to that, since that time, we've since cut down by contract to 1 professional development day before the year begins. So this year did not allow us to provide training for our staff. Recognizing this, there were 48 new staff members coming on board, and I felt as if these would be staff members who didn't know we were an ALICE district. So we invested in an online module that every new staff member had to train on at the beginning of the year and had to sign off that they had been trained. So that in the event when we did these drills, we talked about ALICE, it wouldn't be foreign to them. We couldn't provide the full training, but they did have to do an hour online training that was mandatory in order to recognize and be part of our ALICE, being an ALICE district. So I will turn it over to Detective Cheever to explain ALICE and talk about our Monday night event, if that's helpful. And
Yeah, no, I think that's fine if you want to jump right into the ALICE, but I just kind of wanted to take a minute to acknowledge the level of anxiety that's been throughout the town, as every town throughout the country following the terrible tragedy down in Parkland, Florida, with the shooting that occurred there. And, you know, we recognize that hits home, and even here in Swampscott. But I guess part of my purpose here, and I appreciate the invitation to give us an opportunity to reach out to the town and reassure people that our police department is extremely well-trained and well-prepared, well-equipped, and we have done a significant amount of pre-planning in terms of having plans in place and how to respond to an active shooter as well as other emergencies. And as do the schools. We work closely with the schools. But I have to say, probably the keystone to our planning and as well as our response is having a school officer, Detective Cheever, in the school full-time. And I'm not sure that everyone in the town and everyone in the district realizes that, but Detective Cheever is actively involved in the schools, and you know, if you look around at what's happened in other shootings and incidents throughout the country, you find that, you know, whether missed opportunities to recognize warning signs and identify threats, or whether they properly followed up on. And I can tell you with extreme certainty that we are vigilant and in this town and in our police department and in the schools in terms of not only communicating and recognizing incidents of concern or problems that you know, one might categorize as warning signs or mental health issues or disciplinary issues, but as a result of the close working relationship that the school officer has with the schools, and as a result with the police department, because it works both ways. She serves as a liaison that not only communicates what's going on outside of school hours that are occurring in other, you know, in people's homes, and involves schools where school students that may overlap into the school setting. You know, she informs our officers, she informs the schools. So, you know, she certainly is in a vital position to communicate between the schools and the police. And that working relationship, it's a long-standing one that we've enjoyed in Swampscott because we've had a school officer in place since prior to Columbine, so in the 90s. We were one of the first in the area that ever had a school officer. So I just want to reinforce that, and I think that's reassuring because You know, when I look around where there's failures in other communities, I think that in Swampscott, we'd be on top of that. And we're very, you know, we investigate any type of threat or anything that appears to be a problem in the schools, and we really follow it to ground and go to great lengths to investigate those. So prevention's key, preparedness we've addressed. We have pre-planning in place and training our officers. And, you know, I think our response would be, we're a small town, but we have a well-staffed police force that would be here quickly. And we have mutual aid plans in place where we'd have follow-up officers that would respond in the case of an incident. And we're a member of NEMLEC, so we have officers not only that are active members in NEMLEC, are trained by NEMLEC, but we have the ability to call upon a number of different resources. And sometimes that takes the form of you know, preemptive actions, whether, for example, you know, there was a shell casing found in the school in Swampscott. Now, we've looked at other districts where they failed to really see the significance in following up on that quickly. You know, we identified really quickly what the source of that was, and it was for a piece of equipment that was used to hang, you know, banners in the school. But we also, you know, we're prepared to we did a threat assessment with the help of, you know, the NEMLEC team, and so we were prepared, aside from searching the school, we were prepared to how do we, you know, get back into the school the next day, and how do we make sure that everything is safe and reassure everyone.
Chief, can you talk a little bit more about NEMLEC? I don't think people quite know what it is, because I didn't before we joined.
Sure.
And how the teams are formed, I don't know if.
NEMLEC is a collaborative of 62 police departments. It serves a number of different purposes, but one of the primary ones is that there's a STARS team that Rose is a member of, and it consists of not only police officers, but school officials and school principals and counselors, and a lot of times it's been activated in order to deal with a death in the school community, which was the most recent one that we're aware of. But Rose could talk about that a little bit if you want to.
NEMLEC's been really helpful. We attend monthly meetings, and at different locations, different schools. It's really helpful for me because I can collaborate with other SROs, principals, superintendents, counselors, if I have questions on how they might be doing things. In terms of lockdowns, I've been reaching out all week, meeting with Linfield, Methuen, Tewksbury, just to get a sense of what are you guys doing. I want to make sure we're doing everything and more, something that I just want to miss out on anything. So we've been sharing documents, making sure we're not missing anything, and for me, it's really helpful. Counselors have been great, and if we need them, they'll be here 20, 30 at a time if we need them. I have lockdown drills, ALICE drills prepared for the next coming weeks, and I am going to have the help from all of these outside agencies, and it just, it can only help us get better to have everyone else, every other town, you know, see how they're doing things, so I think it's great.
One of the things I want to emphasize to the committees is that the lockdown drills aren't just happening as a result of Florida, that we have all kinds of drills throughout the year. We have bus evacuation drills, even though we don't have busing. If the kids are going on field trips, we have evacuation drills, we have reverse evacuation drills, we have shelters in place, and we have lockdowns. And for our ALICE lockdowns have occurred at the high school and at the middle school, because that's where we started to ease them in. We, Clark did a modified ALICE drill because, as I said, Mrs. Hunt has been trained in ALICE, and our plan is to roll out those modified ALICE drills to the other elementary schools as well. But there are drills that are occurring either by law a couple of times a year, or because that's best practice. And thanks to Detective Cheever, we did call the NEMLEC STARS team when Phyllis Gottlieb passed. And we had the district crisis team come together, and they walked us through that situation and gave us some really sound advice. They offered to send people out to assist us, but we felt with our school psychologist and guidance department, we could manage it internally, but they were available at the drop of a dime to bring a team into us. So they've been incredibly helpful. Do you want to talk a little bit about what ALICE is, even though?
Sure. So when people hear lockdown, and we have been practicing lockdown drills, in, like the superintendent said, in most of the schools, we have done modified versions. So, and Alice is just a name that they give it, which the A stands for alert, and the L is lockdown, I for inform, C for counter, and E for evacuate, but it doesn't have to be in that order. It's basically options. So data has shown in some of these other tragedies that sometimes going into lockdown can be great, shelter in place, stay quiet, but things change and you have to get out. We want to make sure that the teachers and the kids know that there's another option, that if you can get that door barricaded, great, it buys you some time, and if you can get maybe out a window, then that might be an option that you have to do. Those are the things that we, have been practicing, but modified, meaning we're not having kids jump out windows during the practice, we're not breaking windows during the drills, but we are modifying them. So we give a scenario, you go into your regular lockdown formation, but the scenario changes, and now we have to leave. So we have to decide, are we removing the barricade from the door and getting out another side of the building? And those are the drills that we would like to move into more aggressively and practice with the staff and students. We have practiced with the staff doing those drills, and at the other school's modified meeting, we've gotten into a location and then we've had to move and we've gotten them outside the building. Stanley actually practiced where we got them all into the cafeteria, and then we moved outside and we went to our evacuation site. We weren't calling it Alice because it's confusing. We were just calling it a drill, but we do practice, we go to meetings, we, like you said, we do bus evacuation drills, we evacuate the schools, and when we're walking the kids from Stanley to the middle school, that's a form of the Alice drill. It's the last part, it's the evacuate part. We just didn't practice the counter part, and in some instances, we might not need to use the counter part, and that will all be explained in more detail Monday night. There is a meeting scheduled district-wide for all of the schools here at the high school, 6:30. We're gonna have a video. We wanna show the videos that we would be showing the kids in school, so that the parents can see. Pam and I talked, the superintendent and I talked tonight about maybe doing something on a Saturday, run through some drills for other people that, parents or PTO staff that come into the building to maybe help out and volunteer. If you're ever caught in the building when there is an emergency, it might be good to know what else is, like where you should go and what you should do and what your role would be. So we're always moving forward to make it better, make it safer. It's never, you never just sit and say we're good. Like, we're never good. We're always gonna want to be better and do more. So.
Could either one of you speak specifically to a lot of the fears that are going on at Stanley? I have been inundated with phone calls, rightfully, of people who are afraid. I know that there has been a lot of misinformation on social media particularly, and it has spread fast. And obviously, I'm not qualified to speak to these things. So if you could speak a little bit about that, I think.
Sure, I can talk about it. I think that, first of all, I think the media attention surrounding, the issue with the principal at the school and seemed to generate an increased response from outside the district, quite frankly. That at some point got misinterpreted or miscategorized as threats were coming in. In fact, while there were calls being sent to the superintendent, to the schools, they were more of the type of people voicing opinions. Some were angry, some of them were inappropriate in language, but in our opinion, nothing rose to the level of a threat. And despite the fact that that kind of got circulated out in social media that there was a threat and generated a certain amount of anxiety, which I think was really exacerbated by the fact that the shooting in Florida occurred, kind of coincided with all of this. We did send a police presence up there, and talked with the superintendent about that, in order to really reassure people that the school was safe and kind of get back, particularly after the school vacation, to get them back into school on Monday. And unfortunately, the media picked up on the story again and returned and kind of prolonged what we're hoping to do, which is to transition back to a normal school day. But I can say that the police presence was there, it was the intent of having police up there was to reassure people to prevent any disturbance or any unwanted people on the property. And really there is a resource for people to, if anyone wanted to talk about what was going on. I think the officers interacted quite a bit with the parents. And the feedback I got was that it was reassuring and comforting to have a visible police presence there. But at no time did we receive any threats or anything that would be categorized as threats that I'm aware of.
How about there along Mason Road? That was fine too.
This is not an open meeting.
What about the threat from Daniels himself?
Why are we not being aware of the?
He's the target.
Why was the message is so vague? Yes.
What messages?
The emails that have gone out.
I can't, this is not the time.
It's never the time.
Okay, listen, here's, the school committee understands and is keenly aware of how frightening this time is. We are all parents of children. We are all members of this district. This is not the forum to have this discussion. No, hold on, no. I encourage you to continue to send. I have received a number of letters, as has, I have received a number of letters, as have all of the members of the school committee, as have members of our police force and our district. And these are very helpful communications for us. And if you're going to sit in the audience and yell out, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I implore you to send me a note. Okay. I'm not responding to this. So you can leave, please. You can please leave. I have gotten a number of very helpful and informative emails, and I encourage the Stanley parents and whomever else has these kinds of concerns to keep sending them to us. Because while you are not aware of the work that goes on behind the scenes, while there are, please stop.
I do.
Please stop. Could you leave, please? I appreciate what you.
Move on.
Okay.
Let me just say again, I listened to all the audio recordings. Some were, the minority appeared angry, and some, I guess were, inappropriate in some of the language. Nothing rose to the level of a threat. We were very careful in how we reviewed them. And the majority of them were voicing an opinion, that whether it was appropriate or not. But the calls tapered off immediately after the first initial appearance of the story in the Globe. And they've, unless something's changed, there haven't been any calls since then. So,
Is someone gonna call if they're gonna do something? Sorry, I know I'm not.
I know, but I think that, well,
This is our future.
I understand.
I think it's important to know that there is always always work going on behind the scenes that we are not entitled to share for security reasons, for privacy reasons. The public, unfortunately, it is not in the best interest of safety for some of the information to be shared. And that doesn't mean that nothing is happening. I think we hear that it's not true that there's no information. There is.
They said nothing. The emails are cryptic, there's nothing in the emails.
The emails discuss what. Okay,
We don't know what's happening tomorrow.
all right.
Can someone speak to the context here a little bit? I feel like we're speaking in code, it's inflating school shootings and gender reassignment. Like, what are we even talking about?
We're not talking about gender reassignment.
What
We are
is
talking
happening?
about school safety,
Okay,
and we are talking about emergency training, and we are talking about emergency response. And then after that, we are going to talk about our budget and our new school building business. If there are other concerns, that you have that relate directly to the issues at Stanley, the letters that we are receiving are very helpful to have. The school committee and the school district is reading every single one. And we not only hear it, but it informs all the decisions that happen behind the scenes. And this isn't, unfortunately, as much as we would like it to be, and I know this as a parent, this isn't a public process. Security isn't a public process, and personnel issues are certainly not a public process. So we hear it loud and clear, and we feel it as keenly. So I know that that is unsatisfying on many levels, but this is how it has to happen.
And we are working, like I said, I'm always researching. I sent some emails out today to the superintendent about some additional devices that can be used on windows, window film that can go onto windows that actually is like a Kevlar, and it makes it, when you shoot through it, you can't even get through it. I watched the video, it took 1 minute and 45 seconds to even get through that little glass window. Door locks that really make a door secure. There are things out there we are researching to keep staff and these kids safe when they're in these buildings. We are always working, so I want you to know we have these drills planned, and we're gonna make them so that these kids and these staff, that they understand they have options, and we're gonna work towards it, so.
Marshall.
Can I ask
Ms. Marshall?
Can I ask a question? So my question, and it may replicate what some other people were gonna say, but what legally is the rule for media coming onto the property? Like,
I would say the school superintendent or the principal or the staff there, they have control.
They cannot come onto the property. They are pushing the boundary of the property line right now.
So meaning like the driveway, is that property?
Stanley is
or-
tough because of the street, where Stanley is, there is a White House there, and beautiful White House.
Whitman Road.
And it's Whitman Road, and actually, the school starts after that, even though as you drive up there, you can see the school, and you feel like you're on the property, you really are still on Whitman Road, which is considered a public way.
So the rule is any vehicles and or
Yes, correct.
media people would
And
have to be on.
they've been kept off the property, they've been
If you know who
compliant.
they are, they're kept off the property, right? Okay.
And
Correct.
they could go probably a little further, and we've scaled them back, and we go out every time, and we ask them to be courteous, please don't speak to people with children, and please stay down, and for the most part, they're
They're
courteous,
cooperative.
but they,
Can I
They don't
just add
show
to the
up.
committee that the chief and I spoke yesterday, and also Detective Cheever, and we agreed that drop-off and dismissal at Stanley would still have police presence through Friday of this week, correct?
At the minimum.
At the minimum, yep.
And all the officers are made aware of the circumstances. They've been doing frequent checks over and above whatever, officers have been on post there. And I have to repeat, there is,
To make this continuous earlier, could you,
yeah,
would you mind just, what are the, we keep talking about issues, circumstances, can someone just explain for those of us who
What the
aren't
circumstances
fully
are?
read on this, what are the issues that we're talking about? It's strange that we can't just name them. I have no idea.
I'd
what
say
we're
the
talking about.
circumstances are that there's a heightened sense of anxiety on the part of the parents and the school community.
But no-
As a no threats, but that's solely as a result of the attention that has been garnered in the media, which frankly, I think it's in the context of the fact that there was a shooting in Florida. Had that not happened, people would be feeling less alarmed, so there's already a heightened, let's face it, when something like this happens in a school, anywhere in the country, as a result of our, front row seat to it, everybody feels like it's touched our own lives. And so I think that's kind of the context of what everyone's feeling. So now suddenly, folks are saying, the last thing we needed was attention to our little school in Swampscott, on a wider, outside the district level.
I think,
But I can- Pardon?
importantly, no, please stop. Importantly, we cannot control what is on social media. And as a community, we can control how we respond. And when reporters are around, the fastest way to ensure that a story isn't happening is if we say, there's no story. I understand that there are a lot of people who are very disappointed with how our principal has handled this. We all have heard it, and we do not disagree with you. But what we can control is what we can control. And in a time of fear, I cannot legally have a conversation with you about staff in this meeting. I can't do it. It's a legal issue, and I am not putting our district in jeopardy. I'm going to ask you to leave, please.
Can I ask another question?
Please.
Can I ask about the robocall that came out today about a suspicious vehicle? Can we maybe put people's mind at ease? if
Sure.
we know what that was about?
There was a couple of young girls walking home from school, and they walked to one of the girls' houses. One of the girls walked a short distance away, but became frightened when she thought a car slowed down that went by her. There was no interaction with the driver and the young girl. It came in initially as an attempted abduction, so all our units were hot on the case, searching the area. You may be aware a helicopter appeared overhead because apparently they're monitoring the Swampscott Police Channel nowadays to see if anything's going on that may be newsworthy. But in any case, we quickly learned that there was no apparent abduction attempt. Our detectives interviewed the girls thoroughly. We actually identified a car that may have been in the area, and there was an innocent purpose. The school, rightly so, it was during the end of this, as school ended and people majority of kids had left school, but some kids were still there in an after-school program on the playground. They were brought into the school until we could turn up the source of the complaint, so.
So we want
And
kids
that's a
to-
case where we did talk
Right.
to the press right away and said, it was a non-incident, and they got that and they went away. But again,
But we want kids to report something if they think something
Absolutely.
weird happens.
Yeah,
But then when you, okay.
this doesn't reflect on the report from the girl. It's just saying
Right,
we were
right,
satisfied that it was an innocent encounter, if at all, and that, but we did respond quickly.
And we believe that was the helicopter as well, that it was,
Yes, probably because it went over the police
They
frequency.
scan and they listen to and if it comes in as a attempted abduction, they hear that and
The news does.
news comes right out.
Okay. So that they're there if in the, okay.
But I want to say too, we keep a close eye on the news media. We've had newsworthy incidents at the high school, and we make sure we stage them off campus, down on the street. You know, there's certain things we can control, and we do that. You know, that's one of the first things we do is identify that, you know, that a place for them to be, and say it's okay for you to be over here. And you know, they're for the most part, they're trying to put together a story, and sometimes they're creating one out of whole cloth, unfortunately, and it's a non-story, but you know, we try to control the, you know, the direction of that story, and we find that media is pretty cooperative for the most part, so it's important to communicate something, but they need it.
So will you remind us when the Alice information session is?
So it will be Monday night at the high school at 6:30.
I encourage everybody to attend.
For students who won't be in school on, like, or who are absent the day of the Alice training in school, will, like, that be recorded? Like, not like the actual drill, but like, would that be recorded for students who are absent?
They hear, I would say we could
talk to Mr. Dulett.
talk to Mr. Dulett and see that. But so on Monday at school, we will do a student information. We'll show the student video and then some tabletop exercises, and then on Tuesday, we'll do the actual drill.
Is the online training that you provided to the new staff appropriate for students or no?
Our Human Resources Director, Tony Wyman, went through it, and he's the one that arranged it. It's more appropriate for adults.
Okay.
And we have a different presentation for elementary age kids,
Yeah.
one for almost 4th and 5th grade age kids, and then a middle school one and a high school one. And it makes sense because the one in the high school is a little more information than the elementary kids need. There's a great book that we have that we wanted to roll out, and all the information will be talked about on Monday. I think it will be a great night for parents to come out and just hear more about it, so.
And I just want to really emphasize the fact, I think the Stanley School is safe. I think that, you know, it's a safe community. We've got a great staff. They're all, you know, paying close attention to who comes and goes out of the building, as well as the other schools. Everybody, you know, is all on alert.
No. So,
You know, I just want to emphasize that. I think, you know, we're watching closely and really communicating with everyone at the Stanley School, checking in with them, and, you know, giving the added police presence, which sometimes I'm concerned that can have, you know, an opposite effect and make people feel alarmed. I hope they feel better that we're doing that, frankly. And we'll continue to be, you know, available and willing to reevaluate anything that comes along that may change our assessment at this time, but, you know, at this time, it's no threat and that the school is safe.
Sorry, I did not mean to interrupt that. As a closing, I know a parent at Stanley has asked me to convey an invitation to the fellow school committee members if you are available to be present in the afternoon at pickup and drop-off, just as a way of seeing and experiencing the anxiety that's happening there. I think I have been there.
That would add to it if we were coming?
I think as parents and as known people in the community, I'm going to assume that would not, I'm going to take a lead since we've been given the invitation that won't. But having spent a fair amount of the day there today, you know, I'm keenly aware of how the parents, of what the anxiety levels are and why. So I think that could be helpful.
And I've been there as well. I made a point of being during school drop-off and when they're letting out and talking to parents, and as our officers are there, the school office has been there, so, you know, we'll continue to be available to talk with anyone that has any concerns or, you know, wants to meet with me or email me. Sure.
I think we're going to move on to the next segment. I just wanted to say, though, also, as Amy had pointed out, we are receiving all of your emails, all of your communications. It's actually great to have it documented, your concerns, because that helps us, as you can imagine. we are all volunteers, we all work as well, and we are receiving a lot of information at us, and people want responses, they want answers right away. It's a little difficult, it's challenging, so putting your concerns in an email really helps us, because we can go back to it, we can cite things that we're hearing, and that helps the committee, actually. So it is really hard, I understand, to sit there and to not feel heard, and it infuriates people. People are very angry. I feel like we've been sitting on the stage the past couple of weeks, and there's been a lot of defensiveness, and we really are, we're trying our best, and we are hearing everything that you are saying, and writing it down is actually the best way to communicate it, so we get your words correctly. We get what you are saying. And as Amy had pointed out, you know, there are plenty of things happening behind the scenes. This is a personnel issue that cannot be discussed in public. It just cannot be. So please respect that process, and we're gonna move on to the next segment, which is the joint meeting.
Tell us what's happening tomorrow at the schools, because I don't know who's gonna be in charge, I don't know if there will be
This-
in the building.
The principal is on leave, as was communicated.
So who will be running the school tomorrow?
I will.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
When-
Real quickly, when you say
when-
communications point person in the,
when-
you say you're receiving.
Can you, hold on one moment. When the principal is not in school, there is always a designated person in charge in their absence, no matter what the situation. At Stanley, it is Liam.
Mr. Hurley.
Mr. Hurley. So if there is no principal in the school, it is not leaderless. And your question was about communication and who's in charge?
I've had an ongoing question about who is the communication point person for the district?
There is a subcommittee of the
We
school
do
committee.
not have an information officer in our district,
Right.
and there's,
So who's the right person to send these emails? that you're
please send them to the school committee and
To the whole committee?
to the school
So if you
committee.
hit school committee, if you hit that tab, it gets sent individually to all of us.
Thank you.
So we were all reading all of your concerns, okay?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your patience. I know for many this was not satisfying, but we are going to move on and discuss with the selectmen and with our finance committee. This is really exciting to have you guys here for the first time and all of us doing this together. So thank you all for making the effort to come.
So I would just
Thank
think-
you.
yeah.
Thank you, Chief.
All right,
I did
thank
not
you.
mean to, I did not mean to just end abruptly, but we really appreciate your being here
All
and
right.
your continued
Thank you for the
presence in
chance
the
to talk.
district. Thank you.
Thank you, good night.
Just go around and do some.
I think we should definitely introduce ourselves.
Is Mary Ellen coming down?
Mary Ellen, can I ask you to come down and join us?
Wait a minute, there's other people coming.
Yeah. Can we move or no?
Yes, you will. Cinder's not here. Yeah, you sit next to me.
This doesn't really matter.
We're going to take a 2-minute break. Agenda as it was. So we are going to introduce ourselves to one another. Naomi, why don't you start, please?
Sure. I'm really delighted that all three of our committees are together, and thank you so much for inviting us to join you here, and thank you to the Finance Committee really for rearranging your schedule to be here also. So I am Naomi Drebin, Chair of the Board of Selectmen, and so this is my 4th year on the board, and I'm really excited about the process of moving forward with a new school and looking forward to our conversation.
I'll keep it short and sweet, but I as well am appreciative that we're all, the three committees are able to sit here at the table and talk about the future of Swampscott and our budget. So again, I'm Laura Spadenas, the Vice Chair of the Board of Selectmen.
Do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Patrick Jones, with the Board of Selectmen as well, my 2nd year of the first term.
Peter Spelios, Board of Selectmen.
Do you want to just introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Marzi Galaska. I'm the Finance committee chairperson, and we do have a quorum here this evening, and thank you for inviting us to be part of this discussion. And maybe we can start with Joan, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Joan Hilario, member of the Finance Committee.
Polly Titcomb, member of the Finance Committee.
There is a camera here, so you don't have to feel like, that's why we're round.
Bill Jones, member of the Finance Committee.
Jill Sullivan.
Marilyn Fletcher.
Thank you.
Ted Delano, member of the school committee in year 6, rounding,
Wow.
and then hopefully have taken papers out to continue my voyage.
Oliver Daniels, student representative.
Suzanne Wright, school committee, 4th year.
Karen Marshall, School Committee, 5th year.
Do I have to introduce?
Yes.
Pam Angelakis, 28th year in Swampscott.
Amy O'Connor, 2nd term, 5th year, school committee chair. Gargi Cooper, vice chair, 4th year.
Kevin Katz, school business administrator.
Ellie Seidel, student representative. I outrank all of them.
Thank you. Thank you to the Selectmen and to the Finance Committee. I know that we had planned to get down to business sooner, but I felt like it would be particularly tone deaf of the school committee to not talk about the one thing that's on every single parent's mind. So I appreciate you sitting through that.
Yeah, so I've had conversations informally with you, Amy, and also with Suzanne, and I know that you have a number of pieces of information to share with all of us about the MSBA process. So because I'm not on the school committee, I want to first let everybody here who's listening know what MSBA stands for. This is the Massachusetts School Building Authority, is that right? Okay, and I would very much like to just turn the whole thing over to you to begin sort of sharing with us the process and where we all fit in this process.
Okay, thank you. Fast forward, we're in the process, which if you haven't been living under a rock, you know. We got accepted into the process the end of last year, so our eligibility period starts on June 1st. So we're gonna back up, and Karen's gonna talk a little bit about sort of what's happened up to now in our process, and then I'll start with what's happening currently, and then what's kind of a tentative timeline for the MSBA procedures.
Okay, we're just gonna do a brief history. It occurs to us that while we've been living it, a lot of people actually don't know, or may have forgotten and are wondering, how we got to where we're at. So you can see on here, it was way back in 2011, through 2011 to 2014, where we went through the MSBA process the first time around, and that was in a statement of interest to replace the Hadley. We were invited in. The town meeting voted appropriated money for a feasibility and schematic design. We went through that entire process. As you can see, it took several years, at the end of which the town voted no. So what happened then? Well, we had to stop. We had to reevaluate what we were doing. And throughout 2015 and 2016, we did a few things that really set us apart from that first project. I would say 3 major things happened in this new process. One being that this time around we had consistent leadership in place. We had Superintendent Angelakis. The previous project had a couple of superintendents in an interim. And consistent leadership, I don't think you can overestimate how important that is. So we had not only Ms. Angelakis, but she was also building her team, and this would be a team that would be with the project from beginning to end. The second thing would be that the superintendent convened a task force specifically to look at not only the failed vote, but how to proceed with a new project. We called it the K-12 Task Force, and it was made up of quite a number of community members. And these were people that represented the yes side, people that were in favor of the project, as well as the no side, people that were not in favor of that first project. And it was really with a focus on learning what went wrong, what we can do better, and how, as a town, we were going to go forward with a new project. So that task force spent a lot of time not only parsing the reasons why we thought the project failed, but how were we going to move forward, and what were we going to learn from this and what were we going to do differently. I will say, from my perspective, the biggest lessons that we learned were that the educational value of a new school was not necessarily adequately addressed. In other words, as a team, we weren't able to get the message across of what this particular new school was going to do for our educational system and why it needed to be the way it was designed, et cetera. And secondly, that community involvement was lacking, or was perceived to have been lacking, which basically is the same thing. And that we needed to do a much better job of that this time around. I would say the third really important thing that we did as we started this new project was create an educational vision. And I'm not going to say we did that. Ms. Angelakis and her leadership team did that hard work. And I don't think you can, again, overestimate how important that piece was. So in the previous project, it was about, we know we need a new building, we need to build a new, we gotta find a place to put it, and we gotta design it, and we have to make it happen. And this time around, we stepped back and said, really the first thing you need to do is figure out what is the educational vision for Swampscott. What does that need to look like? And then we're gonna try to build a school to fit that need. And that will be, it'll be a better system. It will be easier to sell because we will be able to explain why we're doing what we're doing. And her team went through a long process of meeting and figuring out what we, what it should look like for our small town, for knowing our families, knowing our schools, knowing our kids, what does that need to look like? And, through that process, what was determined was that grade consolidation was the model that was preferred. Fifth grade did probably belong with the elementary grades, and that was preferred. And that 6, 7, and 8 was a model middle school configuration. And that is the basis for all the work that will come next. So I think those three things really need to be understood. So moving forward to 2016, you can see that between that vision and the task force, they were able to move forward and create a new statement of interest. But this time, not only did they apply for the Hadley School and the elementary system, but they did a second statement of interest for the middle school. Because again, we're looking at the entire town and what does the educational system need. And clearly, it's not just an elementary problem, but the entire K through 8 system needs better facilities. So both were submitted. We were accepted for the Hadley this time around, which is still what we expected. So at this point, I think we should also note that, as evidenced today, we're looking at this as a town project. This isn't a school project. This is a town of Swampscott project. And it's really important that all the town boards and committees be a part of this process early and throughout the entire thing, not only so that people are informed, but that they can actually take part in the process. There's valuable insight to be gained from everyone in the town. So I think that brings us up to where we are.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing you sort of, we forgot that, so while we were doing the statement of interest for Hadley, we had a site visit.
Oh,
The
right.
MSBA came here and looked at Hadley, and Pam and Sean asked them to also look at the other two elementary schools, knowing that, we have issues with those as well. And so the whole team toured all three elementary schools, which was really fortunate for us because they were shocked and sort of really surprised by the state of Clark and Stanley, and encouraged us to write statement of interest for those two schools. And in fact, when we actually were awarded our statement of interest for Hadley, they said, you need to write statement of interest for the other two. And part of that is because we're gonna try to fix our elementary school facility project, one time, or problem one time. So by giving us the opportunity to write a statement of interest for Stanley and for Clark, they're like allowing us to put all three buildings into the project at one time, which is really fortunate for us, I think.
And I think, I mean, I don't know exactly how uncommon it is, but I get the sense that it's not common that they ask for statement of interest.
So just to like summarize kind of what Karen's saying, so like now where we're at, like this time around, we know we must build a school, and to that end, we know that it's truly going to be dependent upon a collaborative effort, like she was saying, and there's just going to be some differences this time around, some important differences between what we're doing now and what happened during the failed option, and the biggest, the first thing is we're going to make a priority to ensure that the boards and the committees are educated to all the aspects of this project, and they have input during the feasibility study and the schematic design and such, so that, like, for example, like the town planner last time around wasn't involved at all in this process, and, it's a giant school, and it's going to impact traffic and neighborhoods and all sorts of, things about our town, and this time around, Pete Kane has been, on the task force since day one. So that's great, like, it's just sort of an example about how we want to have input from everyone, before it's too late. And especially this time around, we intend to educate the community, about the educational vision and about the educational impact that and opportunities that this new building is going to allow our students and our teachers. And then we also are sort of committed to spending more time really listening to the community and their concerns and their issues, both during the feasibility study period and during the schematic design period, because, during those two phases, we still have some flexibility. So we need people to be heard at this point so that there's still room to be flexible with a variety of the decisions that are being made, so that we are all in this together, and we're all really happy. I mean, this town, the average age of our buildings is 86 years, which is crazy. So we know when we build this building, and we know it's going to be, a big, expensive project. We know the town's not going to do something this big for, hopefully not another 86 years, but this is impactful. And and then thirdly, the most important change this time around is the leadership, and that just can't be understated, because this time around we're going to have one superintendent who's invested from the beginning of the project, versus last time we had three people. We had a superintendent, then we had an interim superintendent, and then we had a new superintendent coming on board during that 3-year process. And then so what happened is, even though Superintendent Angelakis has a long history with the challenges of our elementary schools, when she became the super and when there was the 2011 SOI, it was led by other superintendents, and then in 2014, when she came on board, it was just about at the yes-no decision time. And so what happened is, she had to struggle with trying to retrofit her educational goals into a building into which she had no input. Right. So this time around, that educational vision is a defining factor here, that we're driving this entire process, about educating all the students in Swampscott with equity and efficiencies and everything, is driving this building this time around. And so that brings us to what's happening now. So the most important thing we need to do now, especially immediately, like before town meeting, because we need to ask town meeting for money for a feasibility study, we need to educate town meeting members and the community about this educational vision and about what our needs are. So what we've been doing, YouTube videos. What we've been doing with myself and administration and Mr. Dulett and the high school cable club, and also some task force members, I think, they must have left. Megan McLaughlin, Liz Pappalardo.
Pappalardo's up there.
Oh. Sarah Brogna and Neil Duffy were helping to edit some of these things. So we have some videos that we're going to share on the school website. Hopefully get a way to share them and link them for the town meeting members to see, and then the whole community. So there's three videos I have tonight. They're relatively short, and then we're going to have a fourth one that's actually like a tour of the buildings to help education.
And there are a total of 6, aren't there a total of going to be 6?
Yeah, well, don't quote me on that, because there's a little flexibility on it. All right, so we're gonna do educational vision.
Flexibility.
And can we make this, can we get the sound up?
Okay, so this is about the educational vision.
Can you increase the sound?
Volume.
Oh. How do I do volume? No. Stop it.
Pause.
Pause, yeah.
No, I can do it.
Down.
Can I do it on here?
Down below.
Huh?
Down the bottom? Yeah, that.
I'm like touching it, I'm like, wait, this isn't this.
Let me ask you, is technology or an educational vision? Adult ed.
Oh my God, my kids are gonna love this.
He's pressing the screen. So awesome.
All right, that's better, that's better.
Like a 1950.
An educational vision is how we see the students in our community best learning and developing their skills in an environment that will help them thrive and reach their fullest potential. It's a vision that meets the demands of today's educational standards and also provides an equitable learning environment to meet the needs of all our learners. The general mission of the Swampscott Public Schools is to provide and promote academic excellence and to develop and nurture individuals to be creative, curious, respectful, and caring members of society. To best achieve this and strengthen our teaching and learning for all students, we believe we must expand grade level consolidation to the elementary grades. Placing students who are in the same grades all together will create parity in student educational experiences and allow efficiencies and opportunities for collaboration and seamless delivery of services from all school staff. To have all elementary learners together in an upper and a lower school environment is our vision. An additional component of this vision includes moving 5th grade back to the elementary level, where it is more developmentally, socially, and academically appropriate. Also included in this vision is the longer-term goal of renovating the current middle school and utilizing the evacuated 5th grade space to expand middle school programming and to update and modernize spaces.
Okay, the next one. Should be the one that's on. We can do this one. Okay. All right, so this next one is sort of like what the first steps are in the MSBA process, or sort of where we are right now, and kind of what we just told you.
We have about 800 elementary school students learning in 3 schools. This is a snapshot of our current school configurations. We submitted a statement of interest, or SOI, to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, commonly referred to as the MSBA, last April. This SOI was to ask for their help to replace the Hadley Elementary School. In September, we were notified that we were one of the districts to be further evaluated, and an MSBA team would be coming out for a site visit. We asked that they also visit our other elementary schools to evaluate their deficiencies as well. This visit was conducted in October. After this visit, we were advised to submit statement of interest for Clark and Stanley, as these schools did not have adequate space to provide the services required of all our students. We will be submitting statement of interest for Clark and Stanley schools during the next open period of January through April of 2018. Partnership with the MSBA provides significant financial benefits to the town. During our collaboration with the MSBA, we are resolved to hold fast to our educational vision during every decision made until the completion of this project. Our end goal is a beautiful new building for all our elementary learners and a renovated middle school in pre-K space.
All right, so this next one is Mr. Katz, the business administrator, talking about some of the financial considerations and what's happening now with how we're paying for things in our schools.
Forces the school department to spend its limited facilities budget very inefficiently. The newest section of our elementary schools was completed in 1959. This means renovations and repairs require the school department to direct scarce dollars into educationally outdated buildings. At Hadley School, the just completed boiler replacement project cost $495,000. Tens of thousands of additional dollars have been spent restoring ventilation systems, repairing windows, and replacing screens. While these repairs did improve staff and student comfort, the educational limitations of the building remain unaddressed, with all available funds required just to maintain only the most basic safety and occupancy requirements. Similar heating upgrades are next required for both Clark School and Stanley School. At Clark School, $900,000 was recently spent for a front entrance ramp and a 2-story lift in order to make it our first and only handicapped accessible elementary school. The proud announcement that the school was now handicapped accessible was tempered by the fact that 75% of the town's 800 elementary students still attend schools without entrance ramps, accessible bathrooms, or elevators. Just this fall, a Hadley student with a broken leg was required to temporarily change schools and leave her teachers and classmates because the student's school was not accessible. Continued access improvements at Clark, Hadley, and Stanley will cost millions of dollars. This will divert funds from other essential municipal and school projects, yet do nothing to address the educational limitations of our elementary schools, which have an average of 86 years in service. Beyond these two projects, there is a long list of unmet critical facility needs at all 3 elementary schools. The backup boiler at Clark must be replaced. The electrical system at Hadley is woefully outdated. Testing during 2017 found that the Stanley electrical service distribution from National Grid is at risk of becoming unreliable and will probably require repair. The intricate heating control systems in all 3 schools must be rebuilt. Our current elementary school entrances have access control and visitor screening procedures well below current school standards. Even if Swampscott could fund these pressing elementary school needs, this is only the start of a long, long list. A continual cycle of rehab, retrofit, and repair would still leave our schools deficient by today's educational standards. And it would leave unfulfilled our goal of educational parity for all Swampscott learners.
Good job, Emma. Nice. All right, so anyway, this is a preview. There's maybe 2 more coming in this series. We have a tour of the schools narrated by our own Tenley. And so that's an important one because it's showing some of the condition that kids and teachers are currently teaching and learning in. And then we have some members of the task force have had the opportunity to visit some other schools in the Commonwealth that have consolidated elementary configurations, either just different kinds of ways of consolidating different grades, like by floor or by wing, or upper and lower elementary schools in one big building. And we got the opportunity to take lots of different pictures of opportunities and things that new schools have that we don't even know we're missing because we've become so accustomed to making do with what we have and sort of appreciating the charm of our old schools until you go to some of these new schools. So we have a lot of pictures and videos from some new schools, and we hope to narrate that as well so that people will get to see the opportunities that a new school will afford us. Hey, Vlad, can you put that slide back up? And then so in addition to this kind of educational piece that we need to do, we also need to create some sort of a working group. And I think that I'm going to need, we're going to need help with the Selectmen and the Finance Committee and maybe Capital And certainly the school business administrator, maybe someone else from our task force, like we have an expert architect / someone who's worked with the MSBA before. And I think we really need to understand, like this time around, like how comprehensive we want our feasibility study to be and what we can use from the last one, because I'm sure people at town meeting are gonna say, like, we just paid for one 5 years ago. You know, we spent $500,000, and you need to understand, like, so what questions weren't asked? Like, so many times during that last process, people said, did you check this? Did you look at this? And so we need to know ahead of time, like, what we really want to look at with this feasibility study. And we need to justify, you know, that we're going to be coming to the town and asking for a substantial amount of money to really create this comprehensive feasibility study. And I think the more we're prepared to understand, like, what we need to ask for, we're going to be able to make a realistic estimate of the kind of money we're going to need. So that's really important. And then also having that working group that can sort of help work on a presentation for town meeting and a letter to town meeting members, because that's the first hurdle, you know, moving forward that we need to get over. Because so the MSBA has 8 different modules that you move through in the process of building a school. And the first module gets us through to financing the feasibility study and appointing a school building committee, and then doing some other sort of paperwork about like what your programs are now, and there's some other things. And then the next module is the feasibility study, and that's a big one. And then it moves into the schematic design, the project scope, the budget, the funding. And so when you get all the way to maybe the fall of 2019 or the spring of, probably realistically, that's really tight, the fall of 19 to ask for money for the whole schematic design, and that would be the feasibility study is done. We sort of know what we want and where we want it. We sort of have a ballpark figure what it's going to cost. We've had someone sort of draw up renderings,
Right.
you know, a schematic example of what we might have, right? So fall of 2019 is kind of aggressive. Maybe spring of 2020, we'd come to town asking them for the whole kit and caboodle to pay for it. And then after that happens, then you actually have the design, the architect, you bid, you build. And then, you know, that could be probably 2 more years. And then we also need to include in our discussion, like what's happening with the middle school, because I'm sure by this time the town's not gonna have an appetite to do a full renovation or a new middle school, but hopefully if our vision gets realized, we've moved 5th grade back down to the elementary school level in some capacity, so we have some free space there to actually fix the middle school space to be more appropriate for middle school and the kind of learning that happens in middle schools these days that we don't have space for. So hopefully, you know, and the preschool program, I know that's like a big important program too, to make sure. So I don't know, you know, we have to figure out as a community if we want to try to fund this one ourselves, because, you know, and not use MSBA money, because I don't know what that triggers. I mean, we just have to sort of investigate that. But I think this is a really important part of the discussion, because our vision is K through 12, and we need to fix. I mean, you know, the middle school. I mean, we can ask Mr. Katz, has a whole host of capital items coming up that are big, and there's some issues at the middle school, and it's a building that it's a building. I mean, we submitted the statement of interest because it's a building that needs some help. So
What year was that built?
Huh?
What year was that built?
The middle school.
50?
52, I think.
It was built in 52?
That's what it's done.
I thought it was 72.
Would there be 2 feasibility studies? So we'll go forth, move with the statement of interest for Hadley, and then Stanley, once we accept it, just Stanley and Clark?
That's a great question, Marzi. So I think what's happening is, I think no. I think the reason that the MSBA asked for the Stanley and the Clark is so that we can roll them all into one. So that 6/1/18 to 2/26/19 is like 270 days. So our eligibility period. So if we get accepted for the statement of interest for Clark and Stanley, that'll happen in December. So we're still within the eligibility period to like submit one feasibility study, and I feel like that's. I mean, you know, we need to work with the MSBA. We have a point person there that we that will be included in these discussions about the feasibility study and what we need to do, and that'll be part of the conversation, because that's like a weird unknown, because I don't think it's common for the MSBA to do this. You know, I think it feels like they're throwing us a bone a little bit.
Right, but they usually are pretty limited in,
Right.
one project is what you're working on.
Right.
It could be one big school that replaces all the elementaries,
Yeah.
but I doubt they'd let a different level be added
But
in.
they couldn't do one elementary to replace all unless there were SOIs in for all three.
No, because
No,
listen
'cause
to
we
what
did it
happened
last
last time. We
time.
had
We
an
did it
SOI
last
for
time.
Hadley, and we were gonna build a consolidated one
right.
through four. But the problem with that whole plan was, we never even thought about, like, if 1 through 4 go here, where are we putting the rest of the kids? Like, how are they looking? Like, we weren't even thinking about renovating Clark or Stanley. Like, it was kind of like
We
not.
were, but it was gonna
It
be
didn't have this last step, like
Right.
renovate the middle school. You know, we sort of stopped short of doing that. Evan?
I was gonna say, the feasibility study can look very intently at the elementary school, and you can do what's, I think when I was talking to Tim Cooper after the last meeting, you could do what he described as a master plan to look at that 6 to 8, so that the study can encompass the whole pre-K to grade 8, but the primary dollars get spent on the elementary piece, but you still do a plan that can give the community a vision for the entire K to 12 spectrum.
Like, that's definitely our goal, because we need people to be thinking the whole time, this project is a new elementary and a renovated middle school. Like,
So Margie, I heard your question to be maybe about a feasibility study for the middle school component, since that was the last thing she talked about, right? Were you- I mean-
I was wondering in terms of Hadley and,
Yeah, so-
altogether as well as.
Yeah, so I think the middle school, our hope would be that if we wrap the whole vision in one eligibility study, we haven't been able to, the task force was talking about this, we weren't able to confirm the MSBA how past behavior. Our hope would be not to have to go through a new round of funding for relatively smaller renovation dollars for the middle school, and perhaps by implication, since we're going to take something out of the middle school and put it back in the new building, the fact that we've connected the two just by virtue of how we're moving classrooms, that we're hoping that we might be able to fold something in for the middle school to help us address. I think an ongoing concern has been, we'll use Marblehead as an example. Marblehead has a systematic plan that they're going through. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but from the outside, it certainly seems like a systematic plan where they're going elementary school by elementary school right now, right? But they don't have a guarantee of funding from the MSBA for any of these future buildings. Every time they go through it, they have to go back to the MSBA. So what that means is they did this plan with uncertainty, not knowing when and if and when the MSBA was going to take them in for the next building, right? We've decided that we probably don't have the appetite and frankly the time, given the conditions of the buildings, to say this is a 15-year voyage, if you will, which is what Marblehead's going through. For all their schools, I think they're almost at 20 years total for their whole process to soup to nuts. And so I think we're trying to figure out how to fold in as much of the middle school into it, which I think speaks to Suzanne's comment about it's maybe not going to be a Cadillac renovation. It's going to be a strategic renovation of sorts.
I mean,
to-
the truth
to
of the
fix
matter
it.
is that school is not gonna last for 86 more years. You know, like, it's.
What's the expectation for the life of a school? Somehow I thought I heard 50 years. Is that
You know,
about
so,
right?
the funny thing is, Evan, maybe you know, but we went to visit.
Maybe Patrick.
Oh,
can answer that,
oh,
so.
but we went to visit a school, a brand-new school that just got built in Haverhill. No, the first one we went to was in Milford. We went to visit a school in Milford, and they had me watch a video of building the school and then the school in use. And I was like, oh my God, this school is so great. Oh my God, wow. You know, and then at the end of the video, it says, so it's no longer acceptable, you know, the program no longer meets our needs, blah, blah. The video I watched was the school they were replacing. So it was the school was 1972.
Well, look, I mean,
The
when we
school
were
they
at
were
the-
replacing, 1972.
When we were at the MSBA meeting, we were surrounded by people who were replacing schools that were built in the 70s. We were the
60s and 70s.
We were the only town there with 1919.
Less than 1940. There's one 1942, and we had
But
1919,
they were audible
1929.
gasps.
So what, Patrick, what's kind of your?
It's a 50-year,
reasonable-
typically a 50-year roundabout. I mean, you're gonna have systems, obviously, that fail within 18 to 20 years. Windows only last 18 to 20 years. Roofs, HVAC systems, so there's the capital for repair. But as far as a building infrastructure, 50 years is a good qualifying number.
It's tough.
It also depends on how the education, I mean, we can't actually look into the future
I
in
mean-
education terms, but you can see now the spaces that you've been in new buildings are much larger and different because of the needs of, and the way you educate the students, the need for more spaces for SPED or special ed has changed dramatically.
Collaborative spaces.
Flexible
And that is
spaces, right.
that's the main challenge in a lot of these older buildings, even the 70s, that this wasn't even consideration.
Yeah, in 1911, there was no such thing as special education. So
So-
we have so few breakout rooms and spaces, and we've divided, we've literally put partitions in rooms where the windows and heat are on one side and like the door to exit the classroom's on the other side. It's just, it's craziness that we've had to, the modifications we've had to make. And to the teachers' credits, like when I was walking around taking pictures of all these spaces, like they were so happy and like it was so colorful and there was rugs covering like the cracks in the floors and pictures on the, you know, over the holes in the walls and everything. You know, we've done such a great job of our teachers have of making the spaces work, and they don't even complain about having to teach classes in the hallways, and the kids, like, you know, when we were talking about changing with our budget about decreasing the number of classes across the district in the elementary schools, you know, people were saying, well, my kid likes to learn in the hall. You know, it's just kind of funny that the stuff that we've all become used to, and that became so apparent when we were looking at new buildings with like our jaws just like on the floor, like what these people have as far as safety and security. Like from none of our elementary schools can you see the front door. You know, there's no, you know, just stuff, so.
Pam, just a quick question. For the failed vote, was there a survey after that? And do we have access to that?
We do have access to the compiled data as part of the educational task force, the K-12 task force. That was where we started a survey on the reasons for the failed vote. And we do have access, actually Pete Kane helped me years ago compile that data. If I can make it available if anybody wants it.
Okay, and the other, did we have the state delegation in the loop in regards to the process?
You mean like
Meaning
the
Lori Ehrlich.
representatives?
You mean this, yes.
Yes, they knew about it, but in fact.
Wait,
yes,
someone-
A representative from Lori Ehrlich's office was there with us at the MSBA.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what is our reimbursement rate?
Well, that's a magic number.
Yeah, I'm not sure we know that yet, right?
They'll assign that from community to community, some
What's a typical range? Like what,
30 to 40.
low to high?
All over, it depends on.
It could be in the mid-teens to, 60%, depending on demographics, depending on, projects that communities have supported. There may be some recognition for communities that haven't gone through the pipeline, MSBA pipeline. So that can be negotiated in my experience with the MSBA, but we have to get into the educational vision discussion. As soon as we get into that discussion, that's where I think our legislative delegation and really the leadership of the town can go in and work with our state colleagues. They want to see Swampscott succeed here. This is our second time through the process in just a few years. We certainly have learned some things, and I think they recognize that in the process, so.
But the day we were there for the invitation, there were some communities, I thought we heard one in the 70s, that the percentage had already been determined, so the range is just
Well, I think
very-
that, well, yeah, that actually was they were at a later step.
Right.
So it was a vote,
Yes.
right,
But
they
but
were
I
further
heard
in the
it-
process
yes.
at the point where the commission or the authority had determined the rate of
Yes.
reimbursement.
But it was high, and I don't see
Yeah.
that same
I think we
reimbursement
also,
rate for us.
I think also like something, I mean, to build the building we want to build, I mean, so this is like a once in a generation building, right? This is gonna be the biggest project Swampscott's seen, just based on, everything. And so we need to build the building we need. We need to make sure, that it has every feature we need. And the MSBA doesn't always fund all those features, and so we need to make a commitment as a town too, to look at, making sure we get what we want. And even if that means, less reimbursement or more, we chip in more. Like, it's just important. Sorry.
And we didn't do that as much last time.
Yeah.
So with these committees, right, I mean, I think as though I wasn't actively involved at all with the last one, so I observed from the outside. But what struck me was, being a town meeting member, right, there was an absolute void of leadership on town meeting floor for this, right? And I imply, well, I now know, the selectmen didn't have a majority vote in support of the position.
None of them.
Including the liaison to the school building committee didn't support.
Right.
And I don't say that critically, I'm saying that it was a missed opportunity, right? And so I'm wondering, I hear three categories, and we've talked about them, that as we do concentric circles, right, we gotta build, you know, the base of people that have knowledge and the support. And support doesn't mean it's blindfold, we want you just to get in line. It's, let's have the debates we need to have so that the core decision makers anyways are working out concerns, questions. So that as we build those concentric circles and we go from school committee, task force, selectmen, FinCom, town meeting, town-wide kind of concentric circles here, there's, to me, three major topics that people need to get comfortable with. One, consolidation, right? So whatever the word we're using, right? But the educational vision, right? And if people, and we've got to figure out a way for, maybe as a start, these three committees anyways, and you guys have such a head start. But it's fair, even though the finance committee looks at finance and the selectmen, you know, do other things, it's fair for us to ask questions and challenge to make sure we're comfortable with the idea that we are going from 3 neighborhood schools to potentially 1 lower elementary, or however it's going to be reconfigured, and give people a chance to absorb it, learn it, challenge it, question it, and get comfortable with it, because then we're building the next step, right? And the second topic, location, right? Which is something that we've got through the feasibility study, we're going to have a lot of talk about location, but it's also something that I think as though, for these committees in particular, I'm not saying this is in lieu of community process, I think this is actually community process building, right? Which is, you know, make sure that there's an opportunity and a discussion and exploration amongst key stakeholders as we build out to the community-wide discussion. And then the last is cost, right? Which is a huge one, which implicates and is related to the first two for sure. But, and that includes understanding why MSBA, why not 3 elementary school renovations? Why, you know, understanding the system and the pros and cons of the systems. And then some of it's just pure financial modeling at the end of the day. And in the task force, we did some of it, thanks to Ron and others, to just understand, and then thanks to some of the architects that are on the committee to give us a sense of where the pricing is going to be. But those to me are like the 3 main building blocks anyways. I'm sure there's sure others and subsets, but if we can find a way over the next whatever period of time to engage, maybe it's at first subgroups of committees, but it shouldn't be at the expense of not talking to the whole committee, so that people have a chance, so that when FinCom is looking at this, and, you know, we do our best when we're together, and it doesn't mean that we're just blindly group thinking. It's oftentimes not the case. It's that we sit in meetings like this and we disagree, and we talk in between meetings and we disagree, right? And we say, this is problematic. And it's not about right or wrong, it's about just finding the consensus. And if we succeed, not just a majority, but all of us succeed in finding and addressing and at least having that dialogue, I think that is the foundation for the community-wide discussion. This does not pass unless there's leadership, period, right? And last time there was a complete void of leadership, right? And so I say that without judgment. There's a lot of transition and a lot of stuff going on, and, you know, but I think that's, to me, would be interesting if we can figure out the next steps to be able to take these committees in the right times to start exploring, and maybe it is taking some of the task force efforts, right? The task force went through a lot of different things, and maybe it's we talked one day, Amy, you, me, Naomi, and Suzanne talked about, maybe it is we roll out some version of what the task force looked at, and then bring it to the committees as well to kind of go through that exploration. You know, the task force spent 2 years, so we're not gonna spend 2 years, but.
So this whole, so your discussions happen once the feasibility study is passed by town meeting, or before that? Because, I mean, because I completely agree with you, except for I'm thinking.
It's a great question.
I'm thinking like with the working groups, like right now, like to explore what we really need to look at, right? I mean, I really do think it's gonna take someone from each group here, and someone like Capital or whatever. It's gonna take a group like that who's understanding like the big picture in the project, and looking at the minutia a little bit and bringing it back to their groups first?
Yeah, so I think it's a fair question. I think the answer is, for the feasibility study going into town meeting, I guess if I was to list my questions and of that here, right? I think it's not going to be controversial to think as though we need to engage in this process, right? Whether it's 3 elementary schools or 1 consolidated elementary school, we're still this process. I would be surprised if anyone amongst these committees would say, we're going without MSBA. We're gonna 100% fund this ourselves because we have one spreadsheet we can show you and it would talk you out of that in a second. I think we all know that, right? Because it's just so grossly expensive. So then it's about what we're asking for dollars. And I think the questions, you've hit the question exactly, which people are gonna say, didn't we already pay for this? So it's figuring out how to confidently vet what's the least financially we need to do, but to get the most appropriate scope to make sure we make the right decision and get to the place we need to do. And I think that's the making and having school committee, FinCom, CSE, Selectmen, everybody on the same page. And that is probably, I like your idea of a smaller group, vetting it, asking those questions, because we don't have clarity from MSBA as to how to do this yet. Right?
I know, but
So-
I imagine we'll have MSBA.
Yeah,
As
I
part of
hope.
that
As
group.
part of that group, and then
Right.
also we have task force members that
They're
have
gonna approve
experience.
it, they're gonna approve everything step by step. These
Right.
modules, they're gonna look at enrollment, they're gonna look at the educational plan. And I think they're gonna see something different this time, and I think they heard something different. But we've gotta take these incremental steps. And I think this is a great opportunity for Swampscott because we can be innovative and we can think creatively, but we have to have this dialogue because my guess is, Pam's leadership and the strategic alignment, this is our one chance to get this right, and we want to have as many of these careful conversations as we
So can we ask the FinCom, I mean, do any of you guys have thoughts as to what it is, just first blush anyways? Look you'll see in the budget book that we're about to go through, there's a capital item for 2019. It's a plug of a big number for a feasibility study, right? Maybe just since we're all together here, free think a little bit about what it is that you think you would want to, knowing that we're not gonna know the answer of what school, when, where, and how much, right? There's the point of the feasibility study is to get to those answers. What do you want to see? What do you think the proper diligence is to build the support necessary so that we are at least unified going to town meeting, saying we are asking for a prudent number for a good reason? I mean, do you guys have thoughts as to?
Well, I totally agree with you in regards to trying to build a consensus, because we can spend the money, go through the feasibility process again, and then yet we won't have the vote from the community. So I think the biggest portion is education through the community and to continue what you have done so far. Definitely engaged individuals, parents, and just community as a whole, just to make sure that we definitely have the buy-in. So I would say definitely to go along with that process and continue along.
Marzie, do you think that you need more from us on the educational vision or consolidation? Do you think you need more information from us to get to the point where your committee is recommending?
The feasibility study money.
Right.
Yes.
Or do you think you have enough? I mean, we've talked about it, but have we talked about it enough? Have we?
Well, I would also defer to some members that are here today who definitely have children maybe in the school system to find out. I mean, I leave that educational or the development of the education vision and the plan to the experts, to all of you. I mean, obviously, you have gone through the process from, 2011. This has been something that, you looked at the successes, you looked at what has failed, what has not. Obviously, you are doing your work. So I have my utmost trust and faith in you that the work that you have done so far to do it. I think that, I want to make sure that we work with our town administrator to look in to find out, how can this be affordable? I think that's the biggest question or concern that I would have. How do we make that affordable, and can we, looking at either the reimbursement rate, and how do we make that a reality, and just how does that fit in terms of a long-term plans for the town in terms of the growth and the, I totally support investment in infrastructure, because that's very important. I mean, definitely our infrastructure, both from, employees and, the personnel and everything else, as well as the actual buildings and things like that. So we definitely need to invest in that.
So one of the opportunities I see here, and I think that we know through going through the experience and the failures in the past, is one of the biggest, and I've seen it in other communities when we do schools like this, we're doing all of this all at once during the feasibility study. The most important part of this in establishing is the educational vision. And we've had a 2-year more start on that. And I think that's the key. And you've stated before, that once you establish the educational vision, you understand, we get caught up in metrics of 18 students to 23 students. And what does that mean? And everybody thinks, oh my God, it's 5 more students. But yet, it's not 5 more students necessarily in one class. It's sped in how that groups break up and how they're educated. And you see new schools, it's not just a classroom. They are educated in the halls, but the halls are much different, right? It's remarkable. And I wish the community could go and see some of these schools that are being done.
Turns out we can.
We can, we can invite buses, we can invite busloads of people.
And it will change, it will blow people's minds because what this school is now is old
It's old.
compared to
Yes.
some of these elementary schools that are being built and how the kids are brought through the educational process. So we get caught up in the metrics of, and I know it's been in debate now about the number of teachers and how can we go from 18 to, and it's very, very difficult in the facilities we have now. But yet, in looking at the educational plan and how that relates to classroom and classroom size and how it's split up in new designs and institutions is very, very important. And that will establish a lot of these questions of what's the overall size that we're kind of looking at, what are the metrics. Also, what's important to our community is not necessarily important to another community. So the MSBA sets up a series of metrics, and you have required a certain size for an elementary classroom, certain size of this, and this is what they'll fund. But yet, if we have a need or a special program, let's say that's in the arts or something else, that we can, through the educational vision, defend or show that the MSBA, that this is a very important, integral part in how we are operating, then that metric shifts a little bit. So it's a boilerplate in a way, right? It has to start somewhere. But yet towns and communities have the ability to adapt and change what that metric is, and therefore it could change the percentage of reimbursement, right? I mean, certainly they're gonna look at our town and say, well, okay, you're much better off than, say, a Lowell or something like that, right? From an economic standpoint, but yet it still can shift what's part of the reimbursement and what's not. So, and I think after that, that sort of leads to obviously location and anything in our town, the location and just the limited amount of space. It's going to be a really, that's the challenge. One of
Seems
the
like
biggest
everything will be fraught with a problem.
One of the things that.
No, but
3
yet
square
the-
miles,
but-
that's a reality that's
this isn't-
unique to
but this is-
Swampscott that we have to get.
Yeah, but a lot of other towns and communities that are huge go through the same issue because
do.
they're just overbuilt as well. So, and how you phase it or what have you. So I think the exciting part, I think, for our community is that the head start, in a way, of the educational vision and coming with, bringing consensus and bringing people into the conversations of, from our failed vote, it's almost, that was the best thing to happen almost, because then you can really bring in people and talk about what are the issues, in a way. In hindsight, it probably was.
No.
So again, kind of, I don't know if we have anything more, but to maybe help bring this to close. This is a capital item that's sitting in a budget that, by all admissions, is a placeholder number, right? It's a total guesstimate, and I mean that respectfully, right?
Are you
And
talking
I'm-
about, are you
So
talking
we've
about the
looked at other
project? Or
communities.
No, I understand, but we don't know for us being a second timer what we really need to spend, right? So I mean,
Are
like,
you talking?
feasibility study,
Feasibility,
sorry,
okay.
feasibility study right now in our capital budget, right? And so
Because it's coming up
normally,
this
if you guys ask, if the school wants a pickup truck, and we put something in the capital budget and that number changes, at the end of the day, as long as you get the pickup truck, you're fine with that process. Here, I think there's just, if this is not just about a number, it's also about the first building block and getting this group, these groups. And so I'm wondering, to Suzanne's point, is it her working group idea, which is, yes, this is gonna go through the normal process of CIC is gonna look at it, and FitCom and the Selectmen are gonna look at it, but really, we're not starting from, there's a lot more education on this one that we need to do in the next 90 days to get a better number and feel better about the number.
But when we have to educate ourselves, I mean, so there's not very many towns that get accepted into the program and then don't vote for the school in the end, right? So we're in a unique position, and so we need some guidance from MSBA, like what part of our feasibility study can we use? I mean, it was only in 2011 or 12 what was done, so a lot of the stuff is still relevant. I mean, we haven't we still have some parcels of land that we looked at that are still, like,
Right.
there's stuff they looked at that we can use that data, and we just have to figure out what we can use so that we can focus where we spend our money on the things we really need to know now.
Right, so is it a good idea then for each of these committees, whether it's one person or two people,
Yes.
to say,
I'm in.
communicate, coordinate, figure out what you
Like,
think?
it would be
I mean,
really-
like, for example, hypothetically, if we wanted someone like Pat.
Pat. I already wrote his name. It's right here. It's already
So
down.
some of my best ideas is when I point
Everybody
that
just
way.
step backwards.
But I mean,
I
just
think-
to take this now as a next step and then come back and educate our individual committees, because it's just not, in budget season particularly, it's not realistic to think that we're gonna spend too many more hours altogether between now and town.
Right, and it's always better when people are involved versus just
Committee.
getting it secondhand relayed back to you.
But I think if there's someone on finance that has like an interest in the school or has some sort of expertise, it would be great to bring that. I'm like looking at Polly, like nice young mom who's really gonna benefit from new school probably, like I'm not. It's just like nice to have that, and then if there's someone from capital or just whatever, to get a group together that can meet, even if the whole group doesn't meet weekly, but just meets to, get everyone jobs and research stuff and then come back together, whatever, just so that we can be, like, hit the ground running. I mean, our
Right.
eligibility period starts June 1st, so it'd be so nice to have the feasibility under our belt and get going on that.
Can I ask
And I think that it'll help all of us with organizing our thoughts about what we're all collectively thinking about in the get-go, and it will help town meeting, like, to really explain, like, why this is different or why we need this money. I think that's,
But we'll also hire a consultant, though, obviously, to guide us through the
After that,
process,
so,
right?
but we can have an MSBA
MSBA person helping now.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Right, and we actually had someone on our task force that's an architect that works for the MSBA too, so it's like, we have
The expertise,
expertise to pull from.
But at the risk of sounding daft, I mean, we've gotta get this through town meeting first. And for us to do that, we have to have the support of the finance committee.
In May or in November?
May. Yeah, we need to raise money
We
to
need to
hire an
we need to get a
OPM.
committee together
Right, that's
now.
what I'm saying,
Well,
like-
let's just do it. I mean, we
Wait, can I
agree.
just ask a question? Is this working group?
I'm just trying, Jill, I'm trying to get them, we selected ours, I don't know what you guys are doing.
We have to do it.
So are you in?
Me? Yeah. I'm not the right person.
Paula, you in?
I've already agreed to do
Polly's
the
in.
fiscal constraint subcommittee. But- Madam Chair, may I speak?
Yes.
Okay,
of course.
I think it's clear that we need a smaller committee. Let's do it.
Question,
To
though,
have
is,
this small
No,
committee
no.
and work on it and get a
So-
presentation and a letter.
So the selectmen, can I just make a
Yes.
selectman motion?
Yes.
So the selectmen would want to appoint Pat, motion to appoint Pat to that subcommittee. That's second.
The school committee.
Doesn't matter.
likes-
We don't even ask
school
Pat.
committee has I have a question.
Okay.
Does this working committee translate into the school building
No.
committee?
No.
Okay, just checking, that's all I wanted.
The building has recommendations, though, for finance committee members, school committee
This
members.
is how do we get a feasibility study
Okay, no, I
done.
was just checking if this was like a
But that's,
translate.
but, so.
Wait,
so-
is
Not anymore, but.
Let them vote.
finance committee gonna appoint somebody?
Right this second? We're not even all here.
You know, I mean, can we?
Was Polly already?
We were pushing
The
this.
selectmen have a motion.
I'm willing, but
The selectmen have a motion.
But we can't even see each other.
Willing to just send out an email to each of the chairs,
Yeah.
and we will each tell you who the representative from our committee is.
Tell you.
How about that?
Naomi will tell
Can I
you.
just, can I?
I think that's great,
Capital?
yes.
So
Well,
you
this
will-
one we'll have an
you will
opportunity to
find your
talk,
representative
yes.
among your committee within the next few days.
Talk amongst yourselves?
We have done that already, we don't even need to talk about it.
I don't know, John might want to.
Welcome aboard.
And then if you want to reach out to the CIC, you can get
Yeah.
in touch with the chair of that committee,
think
and they
addi-
can give you a representative.
And additionally, in that email, I think like, I know we don't appoint a school building committee until after the feasibility study, and then that's our deadline for it. But I think like if everyone, I mean, all the, there's a bunch of leaders, town leaders in this room, right? And you know people, and there's people we don't even know, but if there's people that you think would be beneficial on the school building committee, there's a certain group of people we have to appoint, with certain expertise and from certain boards. But then there's other people in town that you may know that
would bring something
would bring
valuable.
something to this, and I think like, starting to have conversations with those people, certainly there'll be a public, request for resumes or interest in it, but if we're all thinking about that too, it would be great.
And I think particularly the school committee feels like we interact sort of consistently with the same collection of mostly parents. So we, in the interest of getting this to a broad, for most of the town who are not with school-aged children, we need a broader reach of people to be involved. So we need your help, and very much in the front of your head thinking, okay, who do I know who'd be really good with this? Who should at least be talking to the school committee for the next step? Because we need more than just the usual suspects.
All right,
So how about if we close this conversation? Are you all right? with
done.
that? And let's talk about the creation of a special education fund. I'm also going to put that back in your report.
Yep.
And talk about what success is, and we do have finance committee here too.
So if you all had a packet, there is included a sheet that sort of gives the definition of what the Special Education Stabilization Fund is, and it's Mass General Law. But I can just give an overview. As part of the Municipal Modernization Act, they now allow school districts and towns to create these Special Education Stabilization Funds to hold funds aside to help municipalities deal with the fluctuations of special education costs. So, I feel like they recognized that budgeting for these costs, which changed suddenly within a normal operating budget, was increasingly difficult, if not sometimes impossible to do. So this is an option that we have before us. So the school department, and I know we have talked about this in budget discussions, has changed our budgeting strategy to include only the known projected costs. In the past, we would often budget for unanticipated costs because we know every year that they rise. So we would add money into the budget. It was often hard to defend when we were talking to finance committee or selectmen or whoever, because we couldn't put proof behind it. We know it happens every year, but we couldn't, with definite certainty, say that. So, we've sort of changed our way of doing it to go to a method where we only are budgeting for what we know, even that can change, but what we, reasonably believe to be the projection. But we know that this leaves us vulnerable to these wild fluctuations. So we did that with the understanding that we would have to come up with a new way of handling these unanticipated costs. And, we think that this is the way to do it. So we've talked about it, and tri-chair in between select individuals, but I don't think maybe the broader committees have all the details. So what it would do is create this fund that would allow us to fund it initially and then ongoing each year, and it would be available for special education costs, tuition, transportation, or other costs that come up. We create it with a vote of the school committee and town meeting. So we would have the first piece, and then we would bring it to town meeting. We would obviously be looking for support and the recommendation of the finance committee and selectmen, hopefully, to get that set up and funded. Expenditures, say it was created and it was funded. Expenditures out of that account would be done by a vote of the school committee and the selectmen. So as needed, it would take the vote of both committees to release that money. However, you do not have to go back to, say, town meeting or anything like that.
So finance committee would not vote on that, correct?
Not on the
Those are-
expenditures,
Not on the expenditures, okay.
as they come
So
up.
is the idea that the selectmen are holding the school committee accountable that this is in fact special
Yes,
ed?
probably,
Okay.
right, exactly. It's just sort of a check and balance
Okay.
kind of situation. So what we need to do,
And how are these funded?
Well, so that part, I'm honestly not sure. So we would be asking, we would need to vote to create such a fund, and we would need to go to town meeting, and we would need the help of the town administrator or the selectmen to, help with the wording of an article, or where the source of the funding is, that kind of thing. So that's where we need to vote to create it, but we need it to be funded, and we need it to go to the floor of town meeting.
So
The verbiage of that, we sent in an email to the chair and to Evan for the verbiage of the article.
But we still
That's
don't know
right.
where but we don't,
The
I mean,
wording of
I
the
don't
article
necessarily.
is a detail.
Yeah, I don't know where the
What kind of money
funding,
we're talking about.
right, well,
But even more than money, I guess I'm kind of curious about, without getting into your business or your budget, right? In this year's budget, though, and what the one pager that you've kind of used in your budget hearings, for example, if simply, I'm sure there's a better explanation, if you look at the sped line item, right, it looks awfully flat, like no increase year over year, right? And so does that, so from the outside for us, and I'm guessing multiple people have this probably question is, does that mean that you are assuming no increase, or are you assuming a stabilization account is going to take care of that increase such that I'll speak for myself, because we've had some conversations about this, if anybody's going into this, which is, I would want to know that the stabilization account is akin to what we have other stabilization accounts for, which is unforeseen and extraordinary, I guess I'm putting my words, I'm sure there's terms of art that go with those reserve accounts, not things that, are normal and reoccurring, right? So dipping into that is going to be.
Talked about that, and I would see that the special ed line item would probably increase year over year, but we would still require additional funds in this account to cover the unforeseen.
Yeah, no, so I understand. So maybe just start with like this year, for example.
Let's start with Evan.
I think just to backtrack, I think when the school committee was presenting its budget, I think going back even to the draft in early January, we made it very clear we were not, because of the ambitious goal, which ultimately left the school budget increasing by only 2.5%. With those kinds of constraints, we just could not put any more money towards special education, tuition, and transportation. It just was impossible. We would have had to cut even more.
But can I just stop you there and ask that question then? But that's kind of like us, I mean, I'm just going to be blunt about it. It's like us asking Sean to increase the town budget by 2%, but heck, if he can't deal with public safety, just leave it out. We'll worry about it later.
Well, I think what we were looking to
I
do
mean,
is
we got to
not-
do public safety.
But I think that what we were looking to do was not cannibalize a broader.
No, I understand that, but.
Specifically for special education needs.
Right, so this then leads me to.
So it is,
Yeah.
while it's similar, I think the intent behind it is to build parity and to prevent inequity.
Yeah, and then I get the spikes on budget. I guess the only reason I say this, though, is because then if we were having the conversation, are you comfortable the money that you have in your sped budget now meets your prediction best that you know today for what you're going to need for fiscal year 19? Because if not, then I'm just being honest about it. Then what we're talking about is we're going to allocate money that's going to automatically, most likely, be used in 19.
Well, I think
Which isn't what a reserve fund really is intended to do. It's reserve fund is supposed to be taking care of spikes in addition to your normal incremental budgeting every year. And I just want to make sure that we're talking the same thing.
I think what we did was, and I think we passed out to the school committee and to a number of people here tonight, a 6 or 7 year history, and the average increase for tuition and transportation over that period is about $150,000. Go back and look at it, if you're looking for a number. On average, the average increase is, and you can put it up on the screen if people really want to dig into it. It may not be a good use of our time at this point.
Do you guys have copies of that?
The choice the school committee had, and clearly there's different perspectives on this. If we had made a decision, if the school committee made a decision to fund, let's say the number was $150,000, the average over the last few years, the school committee would have had to cut an additional $150,000 in the budget. And the decision was not to do that, so.
But that's to add 150 that we don't know for sure we're going to spend it.
No,
right?
I understand, but
This information,
But this projections.
this information, we're building a budget like in December, January, And we're learning new things even now and in May, in June, and we're trying to budget for special ed for a year to a year and a half out.
No,
So-
I understand. I totally appreciate that. So I guess I go back to the question, which was the decision to leave it flat just because you didn't have funds available without other cuts to do it, or because the projection that the head of student services does, based on best available information, right, made you feel comfortable that you could hit these numbers again in 19, understanding that things change on an hourly, if not by minute basis?
I think that info that we had then, yeah,
I
it
mean,
may be
there-
a little different now.
I
but-
mean, there realistically is, you can look back, it's great to look back and say the average was $150,000. And what Mrs. Raymond does every 2 or 3 weeks, every month, is she updates the projection for this year and for next year. And for a while, and when I meet with the superintendent to go over this year's budget, she can probably recall in the fall, I was telling her this year's projection for special ed tuition and transportation were over budget, and we were. But now, as a result of things that have happened over the last couple of months, now we're under budget for tuition and transportation this year. The same thing is going, we're fluctuating up and down. And even if we put in 100,000 or 150,000, who knows, we still could go over. I think this is one of the things that we have been struggling with, and we're really looking for some help to collaborate on what should the solution be. How is the school department supposed to budget for something that's so volatile 12 to 18 months in advance? And based on our recent experience and given the other constraints we had with the budget, this is the decision that we came up with. That's not to say it can't change between now and town meeting, but we're really trying to figure out how can we budget realistically, how can we have reserves, and at the same time, how is the school department supposed to keep its budget to a 2.5% increase? There's just too many priorities that we can't meet at once. So that's why we're here, is to try to figure out, how can we solve this?
I think in the past, what we heard very clearly from FinCom was that where we had built in for what-ifs, that was really uncomfortable for FinCom to justify, because it was like, you know, like you're funding a maybe. And so when we went into budget season this year, we went into with the understanding that we needed to be tight. And it was, I think, much more so than we've been in the past, not in terms of simply saying we're not going to spend as much, but really justifying every single thing that we're doing. And in order to keep the rest of that tight, that means that what we've done in the past, where we've built in padding, we've given that up. And I think that we've done that for the sake of, I mean, I hate saying the word because it's so, you know, it's like everybody was transparent. But our goal is to show you, this is the money that we need, this is the money that we spend, but we cannot predict this.
We can't predict the snow or the weather, and we have to budget for snow and ice removal. I have to look at Gino and say, hey, Gino, what's it gonna look like this weekend? We have to do the same thing, and I think, you know, ultimately what we're talking about is trying to level a tax rate and trying to get a handle on really some of the costs, and in a way that builds discipline. This is not unique to Swampscott. You know, sped costs are just like the weather. They're gonna change every year. They're gonna change month to month, and those financial impacts, if not managed carefully, can disrupt our tax rate and our budget. So what we want is really a careful partnership. And I've been here for a year, and I've heard from the finance committee members that they want to see more detail. They want to understand how we get a handle on some of these financial responsibilities. I think we all share a sensitivity that SPED programs are evolving, and communities are seeing more and more cost to education. I think we want to support some of those responsibilities, but we just want to be more careful. We want to understand, and we want to plan. If there is a way that the school district in the town can work out an agreement, and we can establish a stabilization fund that the selectmen ultimately can review and work with you in a very careful way, so that we can meet our financial needs. This stabilization fund has worked out in numerous communities throughout the Commonwealth, and it gives financial discipline. It also gives a sense of security to families and others that are worried about communities' commitment to SPED programs, but it should give everybody a level of confidence that we can be careful with some of our funding.
And a level of confidence also, not for just the SPED funding, but for regular ed funding.
Can we call it special education? I have a real
Sorry.
problem with SPED.
Sure.
Thank you
I'm
for-
sorry.
thank you
I
for
just-
correcting.
Absolutely,
it's-
ma'am.
We
Thank
all
you.
do it. Laura, you're sitting over there, and yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sorry about
Thank
that.
you for correcting
I
us.
just want to piggyback on what Sean said in that this is done in other districts across the Commonwealth for the same reason that we're giving. To have $300,000, say, in our budget for the what-ifs it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel good, because then there is the suspicion from the community, well, what did they do with that if they didn't use that? They used it for something else, and now, look at their budget's really inflated. So I don't know how the town stabilization funds work, but to me, this isn't a separate category in the school department. This is as needed so that when a family moves into town and say it's an extreme case of a special education student, that the school department doesn't have to go before the town and talk about a student who needs certain things. It can be done in private between the selectmen and the school committee, and their privacy and their needs can be protected. And so, I wouldn't feel right putting this in and not spending it with the what-ifs. I would feel right with it being monitored for the what-ifs and protecting the children's privacy, I guess is what I'm saying. So I see it as a very different stabilization fund than perhaps a town stabilization fund. We wouldn't be the first school district doing this.
No, and it's
And
my
what is the
understanding that
request?
funds left unused would roll into the next
They would
year,
just stay there, just sit there.
necessitating, like, requesting less
Right.
the next year or the year after in future
And what are you
years.
thinking for your request?
What are you offering?
No, we had discussed.
You don't want to hear my request.
You know, just looking at
300 was
communities,
our
building
request.
up
We'd like
a fund,
300.
having a target threshold
Right.
and getting there incrementally
Yeah.
over experience and building trust and putting in that relationship, I think that can be a great way to start this path and really support some of the best practices that can help us support an important evolving need that changes every year in dramatic ways. Some years are gonna be favorable. We can't be lulled into thinking that that's the norm, though, and we have to understand that we have statutory responsibilities to meet some of these needs, just like snow and ice. And if we
No, I
can-
have accepted that my number wouldn't work, and that we do need to build trust and see how this plays out over
Incremental.
over the year.
Build trust, come on, I mean, like,
But show that what a pattern of spending may be,
Okay.
I guess. Building trust was the wrong words. What would the pattern of spending be out of the stabilization fund? If 100,000 is put in it and we use 100,000, okay, is that for 1 year, is that for 2 years? So my number is 300. I would go, I mean, it's gonna stay there if we don't use it. But it's really more of a discussion that needs to continue. I just really am committed to seeing this special education stabilization fund established. I've been talking about it for many years with the former town administrator, and I think it's time. And I think transparency with the finance committee in terms of not keeping this within our budget has really, built our relationship up between school department and finance committee, so.
I just feel like we already budgeted with this uncertain, now our budget's uncertain without this. Do you know what I'm saying? So I don't think we have,
I think, yeah, I mean, so look, I don't think the concept itself, let me go back. I don't think it's controversial, right? What I'm concerned about, though, is, right, and we have to elaborate, we have to have more conversation over the next several months, right? Which is, if that, your typical line item then is gonna stay flat from here on out, then, whatever it is, whatever the decision, I'm not advocating, I'm just saying.
It will stay flat. I
I'm
think
just
it
saying that
will
we have
stay.
to understand that, because I think as though, I really want to be careful about that. And I hear what you guys are saying about why you did what you did this year, right? But
correct me if I'm wrong, hold on, correct me if I'm wrong. If we anticipated growth, if there was growth that Mrs. Raymond was able to identify at the time, we would be building that into the next
No, I
budget.
understand that, but I've asked the question twice and no one said that. So I'm guessing the answer may not be what you think it is. I'm guessing it is, did Mrs. Raymond? No, she asked the question. So I'm saying, is Martha, does the number that's in the budget today equal, every other year, if you take the last 5 years, you've had an average of 5.7% increase in special education and transportation total. So this year, knowing what you know, there is no increase.
No, this is expenses. This is expenses. This is not the budget.
Sorry, expenses. So, fine, but increases, I'm saying.
In spending.
Yeah, I know, I understand that. I'm talking about that. So in your budget this year, do you have the comparable amount to cover a comparable increase year over year? And I think the answer is no, right? And so all I'm saying is, so what happened if Mrs. Raymond's then chart says, well, this year is going to be a good year? That's fine, but my guess is you just held the same numbers, and I'm okay with that. I'm just saying that I feel personally, then we need to say we can't. I'm going to take a step back. For the last 2 months, we've been talking about how there's a 2.5% increase in the school budget. There is, but that's 3% increase in town funding, right? So we kind of, I know numbers are numbers, but it matters, right?
Yep.
So town funding was a 3% increase,
Yes.
right? Which, and so if we put another $300,000 in, right, that's now a 4% increase. I'm just using numbers, and numbers matter because we need to know exactly how much, we just need to really understand the reoccurring risk.
I just got a text from Mrs. Raymond. Hi, Mrs. Raymond.
Oh my gosh, she's gonna kill me for these questions. But my only point is, thematically, I get this and it makes sense. What I wanna understand though, and what I personally would need, are we now going down a path where,
we never increase our sped budget. And
well, but are we really
No,
talking
that's
about
not
4% annual increases?
No, that's
If
not
we're
the
talking about really 4% annual increases in town expenditure for schools, then that still hasn't addressed the underlying problem. And why I appreciate that you decided that you couldn't go further with your cost savings or whatever, however you want to refer to them, it may necessitate that conversation that you kind of have to, because 4% annually, year over year, is not in the sustainable realm, right? It's not in the sustainable realm. So that's all I'm getting at, is to set expectations that, we can't be building this up incrementally, such that we say it's only a 3%, but then we add every year another % to a reserve.
No, I understand your point, and what Mrs. Raymond said, that it isn't flat.
Wait, can you hold on one second?
It's based on the current data with the specific students we currently have. But I understand what you're saying. Are we gonna build in our operational budget, or are we gonna continue to ask to increase the stabilization fund? And that's what we have to find out, I think, after this initial year.
But repeat that. The numbers that we have put forward in our 2019 budget are based on
Current data she had in
current
front of
data
her.
that she has.
I'm
Okay,
not
so-
sure, I didn't get the text, but I'm not, I think we were pretty clear that we've level funded special ed tuition and transportation.
But
That's not the
based
same
on.
answer.
That's different.
No,
because
it's a
that's-
different answer.
Because it's based on, no?
But I think the most important point, right, just kind of cut to it for the thing, is to understand that the net effective, I think it's great for you guys to have predictability and the sensitivity that you have on having it be about any one child is a
Can you
great
hold on one-
sensitivity, but I want to.
Make sure that these guys have what we're talking about, because it looks like they don't.
They're onto something.
They're onto something else.
You guys want to something else, or are you?
So,
No, I'm just, so what I'm confused about is the number that Peter's talking about, this flat number, okay? But then what Evan handed out tonight shows an increase projected in sped expenses. So, you've got one document that says it's flat and one document that says it's increased, and I'm confused and have no idea what's going on.
I
That's all.
think that this particular document is expenses.
But it says projected, so I mean, why would the fiscal 19 budget number be different from projected expenses? Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
This is the document that says special ed tuition and transportation expense history.
Right, but then there's a fiscal 19 projected number.
Because that's current with
Oh,
projected.
and as of today, when I created this, this says, based on Mrs. Raymond's projections of tuition and transportation, it's over budget by $123,000 as of today.
they're asking about the fiscal year 19 numbers. How can we have a projected 19 and a budgeted?
You know how we keep that list
Yes,
with
this
Mrs.
is
Raymond
based
about
on-
what the percentages are of the potential
Going into
kids
19,
going out
so-
of district? So it is projected as well as.
Yes, well, yeah, well,
So why don't we have?
So you guys keep track of that, right?
we,
That's just.
we refresh it every few weeks.
So again, my only point being that just to set expectations, I just don't, we just can't, no matter what budget it's in or what fund it's in, the net increase year over year can't be 4%, right? It's 3% this year, okay, great, it's subject to everybody's review. It looks like we're going down a path that we're handling and are being able to deal with some of that. But I just don't want to set, and I appreciate that you didn't want to have to do some other decisions, but
It's not a
just-
shell game.
No, I'm not saying it is.
No, I
I'm
know that
actually
you're
trying
not
to.
saying that, but what we are, but I think that what you're saying is legitimate, which is, let's not say it's this kind of budget if it's really this kind of budget, but it's just funded differently.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
But I think the intent is to fund special ed education in the operating budget year over year with the most recent data
Yes.
projected.
And the possible.
Right, whether it's above, whether it's below, whatever it is. And it's always more, typically. And that anything in the stabilization fund would be aside for
Unexpected.
Unexpected, yes. Yes.
Yes.
I don't think the
Unanticipated or
answers
unbudgeted costs.
The FY projected, that question.
I think we have to have
Yes,
Ms.
but
Raymond.
it's really complicated.
So anyway, so I think, thank you for indulging me. I'm not sure what this year's budget is relative to last year's, but regardless of what it is, I think the greater point is, right, just, it's an aggregate set of dollars still, at the end of the day.
Paul's head looks like it's gonna explode.
But at least this way, it's not if this money is set aside, it's not accumulating in the operating budget, right? If it doesn't get spent, it sits.
No, fair, totally, the mechanism makes perfect sense. It's really about where your baseline is before you're going to be asking for funds on an annualized basis, I think is what it comes down to.
What needs to happen.
If
That's
I
all- that's
may,
all it is.
Because if I may, because if you do spend it, then it does add to the bottom line, so it's, is it really more, I think the
Because the
question is it
baseline is
really?
in motion, and that's the problem, right?
Oh, I
That's
understand,
exact-
it's
it's
The
fluid.
baseline is
The
fluid,
baseline
it's
is
fluid.
fluid.
I
A
totally
kid comes
understand.
back from out of district, we save
save
money. The next day, a new kid comes in and requires out of
You
district,
don't need to
we lose
explain that.
money.
I
So-
know that. I'm
Okay.
only explaining that if the money does get spent, it actually does add to your bottom line. So it doesn't really keep money out of anything. It's still money there that gets spent and is added to your expenses. That's all I'm saying. Because if it gets spent, it needs to be refilled the following year.
Right.
If
I
it doesn't,
understand.
woohoo!
Right.
But-
I just want to recognize Mr. McClung.
Madam Chair, all three of you, thank you for a brief moment. All I'm gonna say is, if it's troubling these boards that spend all their time looking at these things to understand, we gotta get the story a lot tighter before we get to town meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Any other obvious things? Sometimes.
But thank you. I just feel like you just went like this to us. Big shame.
All right, so have we,
Paula just had one, she just had a
So what do
question.
we need to do?
One more comment, a question.
Well, it's a question, and it's related in my mind, but I don't know what the school committee is doing or what's happening with the Chapter 70 funding. I've heard that it's seriously underfunded. It seems like a major concern. I'm sure everybody is aware of that. I don't know I know that can't be addressed in the immediate sense, but it seems,
so what's the big obstacle there?
yeah, and what's being done, I guess, to address it, and how can we help,
April,
start addressing
with the
that?
budgets, it's gonna take some time for the legislature to really, address that, but we're
I mean, they've
hoping
been
that-
working on it for years, and when we talk to our legislators, and we usually meet with them once a year, we invite them, we bring it up every time. We've sent resolutions to the legislature that we've signed and passed as a committee, saying that this needs to be addressed. I mean, it's something that, honestly, everybody needs to bring to their legislator and get that fixed.
Everybody in this town.
Certainly, everybody in Swampscott, because honestly, every city in town is getting shafted in a way, but
No.
but Swampscott more
Not
than
true.
everybody else.
That's not
We are
true.
getting- No, the entire Chapter 70 system is wrong.
It's true.
But then
A lot of
once the
people
way
are really
they
bad at
allocate
it.
it, we get even
Even
less.
within that, where,
Right,
yeah.
even within the base calculation, it's underfunded, but then with what they dispense less than our share to Swampscott.
So it would be a community-wide effort, it's not that, okay.
Oh, it's gonna have to be a multi-community
Yes,
effort.
it's gonna be.
Well, yeah.
There's 70.
Polly, I'll talk to you in a second.
I think there's 70 towns
Well, I mean,
that
was
are,
it eight-
that are
was it
under
eight-
17.5%.
So, what's next steps? What do
Yeah.
we, what do we do? What do we do about the stabilization fund? What are
I
next
think it's,
steps?
I mean, so you, I don't know, it goes through the process. Like,
Which is what, right?
the normal process.
Which is what?
But I mean, it's,
We don't have a normal
it's
process. We've
February,
never
do you
done
want,
this.
you wanna get this done this year?
Oh my God, we wanted to get it done last year. And then
so
we were told to
yes.
table it for the next year. So, yeah.
So it has to be established.
At this
I
time?
mean, we can vote to establish it, but we
We can
can't,
vote, but then it has to go to town meeting, so it has to be an article on town.
Finance committee, and then.
But yet the legislation is just sort of what you provided, it's sort of interesting, because it seems it really takes the finance committee out of it, because then it's just really between the board of selectmen and the
But
finance committee.
not the funding mechanism, though.
Not the funding,
The
right.
funding of it.
And the funding every year.
Vehicle, yes, but the funding
We
of
can
the,
have an empty bank account, but
We have to.
is that what you
No,
want?
but I agree,
Right,
it-
yeah.
because of the other reserve funds.
the finance committee's role every year would be to recommend
The amount.
an appropriation for it.
Right.
Right.
So you would be looking at how it was spent,
Right.
right? So that would.
What you would want to see
See
in order
where-
to.
replenish it and put
Goals
it,
is
right,
decided, right?
yeah, right.
So it seems like then you guys would be sponsoring a warrant article,
Yes.
right? I think as though you've made clear what your ask is, dollar-wise. That needs, Sean, it's not currently reflected in the budget.
Anybody's
So Sean
budget.
would need to look and come up with his recommendation to people. And then I think the dialogue we're having here then continues over the next couple of months
So it-
to just make sure everybody's comfortable with how it will be, how it's being set up now, and then how it will be administrated.
So I want to be candid, and I imagine that if somebody were closer to me, I might get kicked under the table. But I can't help but feel like we were sitting at the table more than a year ago saying that we needed this. And we have been talking about this in tri-chair for months. And we're led to believe that the right time was to be bringing it up now. And now that we're bringing it up, I feel.
But I don't think anybody's disagreeing with you now's the right time.
Really?
I'm just saying that you're not gonna get a yes tonight
So we'll
because.
draft,
The tri-chair meeting doesn't
No, but
decide on everything. so-
I know they don't
They can
decide on
create it
anything,
without
but
any
they do help process it along. And,
I'm hearing-
and make sure that the right thing is happening at the right time.
I'm hearing Mr. Fitzgerald saying he would draft something up.
so we'll draft a warrant, we can put an article in here for discussion. This budget starts the conversation, so I don't want anybody to think that, a budget is the end of the conversation. Tonight, we just start the process, and yes, I didn't include sped stabilization because frankly, it's your elected responsibilities to say that we're ready for this, and we're ready to have the conversation, have a conditions, or a few conditions established between the finance committee and the board of selectmen and the school committee that really would help us support stabilizing the tax rate, because that's what the goal is. It's stabilizing the tax rate and getting away from wild fluctuations that are problematic when we're looking to be careful about capital planning and careful about all the other responsibilities we have. We've got to get back to that financial discipline. This is a strategy that has worked in other communities, and it's my hope that we can work together and put something in place incrementally over the next few years that gets us to a stabilization, a number that we can all feel comfortable with, that would help support families that ultimately need these special education services. And I think it can be done in a very careful way. The Finance Committee is the gatekeeper, though, and I think your experience with making sure that we have careful checks and balances between the Board of Selectmen and the school committee is going to be needed to be monitored year after year, and perhaps over the next couple of years as we incrementally get there. That's a good way to start the conversation.
Do you have historical data that you'll have access to, say, over the course of 8 years that shows the spending of, that would have been over your spending for SPED and how it, I'm sorry, special education, and how it really affected your budget? Like, are you able to, do you have the data that would say, we spent $1 million this year, and in year number 4, we were hit with a spike that cost us X amount. Like, how often are there spikes? Is there any type of, do you have that type of
Well,
information?
there also used to be, we also used to have a, Evan, Pam, you're gonna have to correct me here, the fund that we depleted.
Circuit breaker.
Circuit breaker. No, okay.
It's like a game show.
I
I don't know who got it first, but we were all wrong apparently.
Okay, I'm gonna talk to Mrs. Raymond about that tomorrow, and, you know, I should have invited her tonight, but I was trying to give her the night off, and clearly she's not taking it. So, anyway, I will look into that. We have all the data on all of our students, so I'm sure we could, I don't know what form it's in, so let me speak with her about looking at that, because that would probably be helpful in this
I
decision
think
making.
that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I agree.
We do have a tuition spend expenses.
Special education.
FY 13 through 18.
Right.
But we
so-
don't know what
Right.
was
We want it-
budgeted
we
and
have to
what
look
was
at what was
unanticipated.
budgeted.
We're all
Yeah.
looking at that.
What was budgeted versus what was unanticipated.
And the hard part
He
is
updated
That money was in our budget.
combing through the old budget combing through the old budget where we know that things were put into non-correct line items.
All right, so the
Okay.
next step is our town administrator is gonna be drafting, you're gonna make a recommendation
I will.
about how to get this fund started, what should go into it, and how the wording for the.
That's right, we've got a template, we've already looked at a few communities, and as we develop the FY19 articles, we'll just place this in there and the
And
board.
that's it's gonna be your recommendation, so you're gonna circulate it to all of these committees within, how much?
I think we can do it within a week, we already have.
Okay. All right, so then we can bring it up at our next meetings individually, and then we can come together. Good. All right. Are we good to move on?
I think we
Yes,
are.
please.
All right, let's move on to our
Great.
Oh, no. Where was I on the?
It's 10 o'clock.
10 minutes?
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Welcome to the Board of Selectmen.
No, seriously though, honestly. Sean, can I, wait on.
I'll make it as quick as possible. I would say 15 minutes, and then we'll have some questions, so that will be as long as.
Okay, anytime you think of making an editorial comment, don't.
So,
I'll second that,
thank you.
Jill.
You can get away with
If somebody could get Mr. Franklin back here, I'd like to use the bell. So,
I have a gavel.
I want to thank the Finance Committee and the number of our department heads for working with us. This year, we've had a couple of presentations at special town meetings, but also at a number of finance committees to talk about the different format, the different changes that we're making. This year, there are substantial changes to Swampscott's municipal budget that I'm just going to outline in this presentation. We have prepared a new budget workbook that has a lot of additional data. We have 5.
Can I just stop you there? I just want us to give our finance team a hand, a round of applause for presenting the budget book at this point in the budget this year.
So, Ron Mendez, the Assistant Town Administrator, Cheryl Herrick Stella, our Town Accountant, Gino Cresta, all have worked very hard. Ron and Cheryl were at Town Hall all weekend trying to get this budget together, and they've worked over the last 6 months really to detail, a careful budget. These are the general categories. If you look at the state budget or federal budget, you'll see general government, public safety, public works. We have a budget that's similar. I'm going to talk a little bit about all of these functions. Here's how the budget breaks out proportionally. About 57% of our local budget funds education. We have 16% for general government. Human services at 0.5%, public services at 5%, enterprise funds is at 9%. This budget appropriation comes in this year at a recommended 1.58% increase. Last year was at 1.6%. In 2017, the budget was up 3.1%. 16, it was up 4.2%. 15, it was up 2.2%.
and 14 was up 3.7%. So you can see, we're recommending a budget that is conservative, it's tight, we've gone back, we've looked carefully at municipal finance. We started with a zero-based budget process. We looked at more than 5 years worth of actual averages. We went and looked at every line in the budget, and our town accountant added another 130 lines because we want to be specific. We want to get into the details, and we want to be as careful with how we put this budget together as we are with how we look at revenue. We've had a number of meetings, so just starting right off with administration and finance. This budget, bottom line, is increasing by 17%, but much of that increase is just transfers and reclassifications that we've had to make because of some of the accounting standards. We had public educational and government access, PEG funding, supporting technology in the town budget over the last few years that we had to transfer back into PEG accounts. That's just part of our responsibility. That caused us to really recalculate the technology budget. We went from spending relatively small amounts of money in technology over the last few years to budgeting more actual, upwards over $540,000 this year. That was truing out the budget. So when we think about zero-based budgeting, it's not always just reducing budget lines, it's about budgeting accurately. You'll see some of these changes in a number of budgets. Community development, we actually are recommending a slight increase. I know that Swampscott has structural issues to deal with, but we're not gonna be able to just cut our way out of problems. We've got to look at ways to grow our tax base. We have to look at the community development function and think about how we support development of Vinnon Square or Humphrey Street or perhaps the MBTA neighborhood. We went out and got 8 new liquor licenses. This budget recommends increasing our part-time assistant town planner into a full-time position. We did transfer a number of employees. We did a town hall reorganization, so we have an employee that was added to that department. And we looked at establishing funding for a number of key consulting projects. Public services is up by 16%. This is primarily consolidating building maintenance services. The town has a very successful partnership with the schools, with our facilities manager. We're now consolidating cost of contract. We're looking at managing contracts, utility contracts in one department. It was amazing how many departments had contracts for emergency generator repair. We're consolidating that. We're looking at it strategically in one budget. If you look at page 24 of the budget, you'll see some of the detailed budget development. Public safety, this budget presents as decreasing. It's not, but we did transfer money in and out of this budget in a way to build clarity. Overall, the budget increases by 1%, both police and fire, but we budgeted overtime actuals. We looked at 5 years worth of actuals, and it was surprising to me to see actuals that were trending hundreds of thousands of dollars over appropriations year after year. It told me that we just weren't budgeting our cost of contract. The town has collective bargaining contracts with a number of unions. Those contracts are established with minimum manning standards, and we should budget accurately and manage those costs as best we can. We've broken out a number of these costs in our police and fire budgets so we can see where these contract costs are and really look carefully at a number of these responsibilities. We've looked at making investments in emergency management in our harbor master position. This is also exclusive of cost of living increases or adjustments. We'll get into that a little later, but I have included some of those costs in our personnel budget. So human services is up slightly by $41,000 or 4%. The overall increases are a little, they're relatively small, but when you look at the transfers in and out of the budget, you know, we are building and supporting our commitment to human services this year. We looked at sustaining a number of important programs. with education. I really do think the school department has done something this year that's different. In prior years, we have a much tighter budget. We just spent some time talking about that. We have had a number of meetings. The superintendent and I have shared a great conversation about being more fiscally prudent, but being careful. We're both looking to ensure that we maintain important core programs, but doing it in a way that's financially prudent. Our stabilization funds, this is a big part of our responsibility as a community. We are looking to get to best practice. We were successful this year. Our Assistant Town Administrator, Ron Mendez, and our Town Accountant, Cheryl Eric Stella, worked with our rating agencies to increase our bond rating. We are recommending that we place $250,000 in our capital stabilization fund, $500,000 in our stabilization fund, and $750,000 in our OPEB trust fund. That's our other post-employment benefits. That's one of our most costly liabilities. We have $65 million in liabilities for OPEB. We're trying to pay that down strategically. The one reason why we didn't get to AAA bond rating was because our OPEB costs and our funding for OPEB is lower than AAA communities, and we're trying to make sure that we get the best bang for debt service. Here's an overview of our stabilization over the last few years. You can see our free cash and our stabilization and how it's trending. Overall, we're maintaining that 16.8% reserve, and that's made up with our free cash, stabilization, and excess levy capacity. So a number of metrics are improving and stabilizing, but this budget does look at how we're maintaining that fiscal discipline and stability with stabilization. Here's our assumptions on tax rates. So we've looked at the tax rate and how this budget will affect the tax rate. Based on I think a reasonable use of free cash of $500,000 and a reset of local receipts, we're estimating that there'll be a slight levy increase of 2%. Certainly that's not insignificant. We understand the weight of Swampscott's local tax rate. It's among the highest in Essex County, and frankly, we're concerned about sustainability. And so as we go through, our local aid came in this year, relatively small amount of local aid when you factor out the charges. So we had $242,000 in local aid, $227,000 in assessments, so that net was a little over $15,000. So that's pretty tight. Sometimes you hope that will go up. Local receipts are budgeted more closely to actuals. Over the last few years, we've had a few discussions. Selectman Spelios at special town meeting, but even our recent joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee, we talked about local receipts. What are our actuals? 2 years ago, we budgeted $3.8 million. This year, we've got $4.6 million in local receipts. Our actuals are trending upwards of $6 million, a little over $6 million. So we're a little under local receipts, but we're closer. And we're closer because we're trying to be careful. We want to make sure that we present a budget that mitigates the impact on our levy, and this budget does that. We're trying to be more careful by looking at our local receipts in a much more disciplined way. So the budget highlights for capital are on page 168 to 180. This year we spent a lot more time thinking about capital. Our capital committee has met more times this year up to this point than we met all last year, and I think it's a credit to the committee that they are studying capital. You won't be able to see this slide, but if you open your budget books, you'll see we've got more detail. We've got project descriptions. We've got categories of where we're funding certain priorities out of and the totals. We also have a 5-year plan, but this table goes out 30 years. And so we're building capital planning much more carefully, and we're looking at this in a way that would help us, again, get back to tax rate. What can we afford and when? We're doing this by looking at our debt roll-off. Again, Ron has put together some analysis on our debt, and and we're trying to package debt in a way that maintains a 2.4 to 2.6 annual increase in the debt service budget. This is really the amount of capital debt that we can afford every year. It ranges from this year at 2.3 million to next year at 1.2 million. Following year, 1.8 million. The following year, 1,025,000, and next year, 2.5 million. So it's marrying our excluded debt. As you look at the excluded debt for the high school, that's going down incrementally over the next few years. And as that goes down, we're building up our non-excluded debt. So we're looking at our capital investments, trying to stabilize some of the quality of life and some of the critical needs that we have. Here's a detail of some of the projects that I've recommended in this budget. It totals $2.4 million. Here are the highlights. We have some police firearm training at $33,000, new lights for Humphrey Street with another $125,000, school technology upgrades at $223,000, life safety upgrades to Clark School, HVAC upgrades to Stanley School, sprinkler systems to the high school at $295,000, replacing of DPW equipment at $144,000, and an estimate for the Hadley School feasibility study at $750,000. And so we did look at a number of communities with recent feasibility studies, and they're ranging between $700,000 and $750,000. The MSBA will not give us a number to budget, but they did point us to a number of communities that are currently looking at a feasibility study. The good news is, if we don't need to spend $750,000, we can apply it to the project. But I'm recommending that we raise that amount, because we don't want to have not enough. And we've got a lot of work to do to try to figure out how to balance the needs for the community. So the challenge is ahead. Our OPEB liability, as I mentioned, is significant. We've made some progress, and certainly we're looking at it, but this budget does fund I think a reasonable amount of support for the OPEB liability. Making that investment here today will help save money in the future and get us to a better position. It's a structural issue that we're trying to resolve, and we're in a good position to support that. You know, when we look at our collective bargaining agreements, as I've mentioned, not just the town, but all of our collective bargaining agreements are triggered. It's not just a COLA. When we look at the COLA and we have a conversation about a COLA, we've got to look at the total cost of contract. A lot of the COLA increases don't include steps and lanes and don't include other cost items that are affected by that COLA. And we need to study that in more careful detail and budget accordingly and monitor that so that we can get on top of some of these costs that are driving budgets at over 2.5% increase. Our solid waste service contracts are going up significantly. This is happening nationally. The cost of commodities, recycling commodities, have gone up, and it's challenging for communities to really maintain levels of service. And so we're going to have more conversations about how we manage solid waste services and some of these significant costs. Another impact to Swampscott is our eroding commercial base. Over the last many years, we've seen many of our commercial properties shift over to residential. That's hurting our revenues. That's hurting our ability to generate more commercial revenues to help support many of the services and many of the budgets that we're responsible for. And just lastly, you know, we have a significantly higher tax burden than communities around. Our property values are about 12% higher than the average in Essex County, but the tax bills are 35 to 40% higher. There's not a day that goes by that I don't hear from a resident that's concerned about our taxes, and we have to make this a priority. This budget helps to support a strong look at our budgets. I think it does help build a careful step forward for Swampscott, funds many of the priorities. Here's the schedule for how we began the discussions to build this budget. We're going to get into a number of important conversations. It's important for folks to understand, though, that this is the beginning. This is the beginning part of the process. I've made some recommendations with the support of a number of dedicated department heads and staff. I think these are careful considerations, but I do look forward to working with the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee. This presentation and the budget is online, so if you go to town.swampscott.ma.us, you can look at this in detail. As you look at the budget, it includes a breakout of each department with a little description, but it also has detailed budget summaries that include 5 years' worth of actuals for every department. So it's my hope that the Finance Committee will be able to look at that and help us support making important changes that will continue to improve the quality of life of the residents of Swampscott. That's my presentation. All right. I do just want to recognize our team. I know Naomi recognized them, but they are the most dedicated, the most inspiring colleagues that I've had a chance to work with. I'm proud of them, and certainly, you know, we've got some weather tomorrow, Gino, so you need to get home and try to figure out how that 3-foot surf is going to protect the town. But, you know, we have some great opportunities here, and I'm inspired by the local officials and town employees that we have that care deeply about the community. So let's make the most of it. Thank you.
I also want to mention this week is the 1-year anniversary of our town administrator joining us. He's been here for 1 year exactly.
I know, it's amazing. Thank you.
Sean, we're delighted that you.
I'm delighted to be here.
Still
So.
here.
I know, it's amazing. You celebrate 1 year for the town administrator. It's like, wow, he made it.
5 weeks.
I know.
It's only been 7 weeks.
So we will be meeting, I will be meeting with the Finance Committee Monday night, so I expect that we'll have lots of detailed conversations. I hope this budget gives you a good tool for those discussions.
Thank you.
So unless there are burning questions that have to be asked, let's move to the next item on our agenda. And
So do you guys have more on your agenda?
what we would like to do is, I'm going to ask a member of my board, we have votes that we just need to approve a number of items. I'd like a motion to actually approve all of them unless any member of my board has a problem with any of these. I'll quickly say what they are, and then we're going to have one motion.
Okay, so they have a consent agenda.
Right, consent. So we're going to approve meeting minutes from quite a few dates. We have September 27th, some from October, November, and then March of 2017. We've got a one-day beer and wine permit for Reach Arts. They're having an event on March 9th. And approval of a one-day wine permit for the Swampscott Library. March 16th, they're doing a fundraiser. It's a Fabulous Friday fundraiser.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent, thank you very much. We're done with our agenda.
Right, so if I can have a motion, I think we're going to table all of our, except that I would like to put a motion on the table to move our next meeting from March 14th to March 7th.
Oh, I can't wait.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion for, okay, so Tricia, I'm going to entertain a motion to.
We're still meeting.
I'm going to entertain a motion for an additional school committee meeting on, we don't need a motion for that. We're just going to post it. Never
What they
mind.
need to first read is.
Okay, so, if you guys could just give us a minute, we just have to close up one thing. You guys, you don't need to sit for it, but we need you to shush. So, The high school program of studies requires a review from us. The director of the director of curriculum is going to send this to each of us on the school committee tomorrow with the request that we have some homework to do and forward questions to her promptly.
To be prepared to vote
To be
next
prepared
Wednesday.
to vote
Yes.
next Wednesday.
And we can do the
Okay.
calendar next Wednesday as well.
And I will, and we'll put
So I
everything
will-
off.
Okay, so then I make a motion that we move the remaining agenda items to next Wednesday.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, then I'll entertain a, can I, so,
She got it.
so,
We vote on the consent agenda, just to,
No, put it on the next
no.
one.
So then, the next question is, because we've never done this before, to close out our school committee meeting, do you need to do anything?
We usually sing.
Oh,
So why don't you do
Gar-
your song?
we
You
need to
your
do-
song first, and then we'll follow.
Amy, you need
Gargi
to do-
tap dances.
Amy, we need to do all in favor for that motion,
for which motion?
to move all the agenda items.
Okay, so,
We made
I
it
had
in a
a-
second, we just need a vote.
all in favor? Okay. So I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.